Chapter 751. The evil sacrificial spirit was covered in shaman energy. With one punch, he knocked the Kuei cow that was charging at us to the ground. As soon as the Kuei cow landed on the ground, it transformed back into its human form. Blood trickled from the corner of its mouth, but it didn't seem to have suffered any serious injuries. I was surprised. Even I couldn't guarantee that I could withstand the attack from the evil sacrificial spirit. It seemed that I had underestimated the man's power. While I was still in a daze, the evil sacrificial spirit noticed that I hadn't taken any action. He reminded me that the fatty was still below the high platform. I immediately reacted. The fatty couldn't use his Tao energy in Billows Mountain. Fighting against the Kuei cows was like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. After thinking about it, I immediately flew toward the fatty's location. At this moment, the fatty was surrounded by the Kuei cows. He held a torch in his hand and was fighting against the Kuei cows. However, it seemed that he wouldn't be able to hold on for long. I landed next to the fatty and signaled him to calm down. Then, I released my shaman energy. After dissuading the Kuei cows, I grabbed the fatty and flew toward the sea. The Kuei cows below looked surprised. While they were still in a daze, we had already crossed the mountain. I took the fatty and flew out of Billows Mountain. When we reached the sea outside the island, we stopped and placed him on a rock. Then, I turned to look at the village. The fatty had finally recovered. Seeing that I hadn't taken any action, he asked me, "Why didn't you help?" I shook my head at him. He didn't know that the evil sacrificial spirit was residing in the little zombie's body. I couldn't tell him about it, so I just found an excuse to brush him off. The fatty nodded and didn't pursue the matter further. Instead, he asked me why we had to run to the high platform and how we had broken the 9 Temples displacement formation. I told him the whole story. Then, I remembered the change in the Eastern Emperor Bell. Do you know, after the fatty heard what I said, he paused and gave a vague answer. He said that perhaps the Eastern Emperor Bell was the formation I that caused the 9 palaces to shift. The position of the formation I in the formation was extremely weak, which was why it fell when I pushed it. It was precisely because of this that the formation was broken by me. While we were talking, the evil sacrificial spirit appeared in the sky. I waved at him to summon him. A few seconds later, he landed in front of me. I saw that his expression didn't change, so I guessed that he wasn't hurt. I asked him about the situation in the village, and he told me that after we left, he killed the man. He wanted to kill all of the Kuei cows, but he remembered what I had told him before. So he chopped off the man's head and came to find me. Then he handed the blood-stained Kuei Nyo head to me. I received the Kuei head and threw it into the Xiang Lu bag. We can't stay here for long. We don't know when those Kuei cows will find us. Although our strength is far above theirs, it's better to avoid trouble. We should think of a way to leave this place as soon as possible. I told them what I had in mind, and they both agreed. Then, we returned to the place where we had entered. Strangely enough, we didn't find the stone tablet. This was a little difficult. Without the stone tablet, there was no way to open the barrier. I looked at the evil sacrificial spirit and asked him, "Do you have any ideas?" The evil sacrificial spirit looked troubled. After pondering for a while, he said, "The Eastern Emperor Bell has the power to change time and space. Why don't we give it a try?" I didn't know if the evil sacrificial spirit's method would work, but I had to give it a try. Then I took out the Eastern Emperor Bell from the Xiang Lu bag and tried to use the shaman energy in my body to activate it. Under the activation of my shaman energy, the Eastern Emperor Bell slowly glowed. However, it was still the size of a bell. I had already used up a lot of my shaman energy, so I didn't have the strength to activate the Eastern Emperor Bell. The energy in my body was about to be used up, but the Eastern Emperor Bell didn't change much. The evil sacrificial spirit saw that I was having a hard time, so he signaled me to stop and let me take over. His power was much higher than mine, and the shaman energy in his body was thicker than mine. When he activated his shaman energy and touched the Eastern Emperor Bell with both hands, the Eastern Emperor Bell immediately changed. In a few seconds, the Eastern Emperor Bell became the size it was before, and the energy around it was abundant. On the other hand, the evil sacrificial spirit's face was still cold and didn't look like he was exhausted. At that moment, the evil sacrificial spirit asked me if we should break the restriction now. After hearing what he said, I thought for a while and told him not to be impatient, but to prepare to chop some trees. I saw that he had some doubts on his face, so I explained. Billows Hill was located in the East China Sea. When I came in, I had observed that there weren't any reefs or islands in the surroundings. If we were to break the restriction now, we would most likely be drowned in the sea. Even though we could fly on the sea, there was a high chance that we would be discovered once we enter the country. At that time, it would attract a lot of trouble. So, according to my idea, we should first prepare a wooden raft, and after entering the country, we would think of a way to mix into the surrounding fishing boats. The fat man at the side agreed with my idea, but the evil sacrificial spirit obviously didn't understand what I was doing. However, he didn't say anything and only flew towards the island at lightning speed. After a while, he returned with a dozen logs. After the wooden raft was ready, I told the evil sacrificial spirit to break the restriction. Before that, out of consideration for safety, I used the remaining shaman energy in my veins of the sky to form a layer of protection, covering the fat man and me. After the evil sacrificial spirit's reminder, he controlled the Eastern Emperor bell and smashed it into the sky. There was a mighty sound of the bell, and the heaven and earth lost their colors. The entire sky started to flicker. Immediately after, there was a crisp sound. A dark green barrier appeared where the Eastern Emperor bell had flown to. The light surrounding the Eastern Emperor bell disappeared, and it turned back into the shape of a bell as it flew back. After seeing that, I immediately told the fat man to return to the monster refining gourd. After hearing what I said, he was puzzled and asked why. I simply told him about the strangeness of Billows Hill, and he nodded before entering the monster refining gourd. After the fat man disappeared, I followed the evil sacrificial spirit and flew towards the barrier. After rushing out the barrier, I took out the wooden raft from Xiang Lu's pouch. The evil sacrificial spirit and I stood on the wooden raft and looked at the situation in front of us. The position of the barrier happened to be on the surface of the sea, and at that moment, the dark green barrier was disappearing at a speed visible to the naked eye. In just a few moments, it had completely disappeared. Looking at this scene, I couldn't help but sigh. I didn't know who made this restriction on Billows Hill, as it could actually repair itself automatically. If the fat man was here, he would definitely ask for an explanation. Thinking about that, I softly called out to the fat man. A few seconds later, he appeared in front of me. After the fat man came out, he saw that we were currently floating on the sea, so he took the opportunity to sit down and let out a sigh of relief. Not only him, but the moment I came out of the barrier, my body obviously felt much more relaxed. I could also feel the abundant Tao energy in my body. His body, which was originally weak, had been greatly relieved. I asked the evil sacrificial spirit to cast a spell to make the wooden raft float towards the west, while I sat down and closed my eyes to regulate my breathing. Previously at Billows Hill, I had almost used up all of the shaman energy in the veins of the sky. Fortunately, I hadn't completely absorbed the energy that the Tai Sui had given me when I was at Incorp's sect. Now, I could use it to replenish the emptiness in the veins of the sky. After an unknown period of time, the fat man's exclamation interrupted me. I opened my eyes, and the sky had already darkened. I looked in the direction that the fat man was pointing at. There were a few lights that were flashing. It should be a ship. I mobilized the Tao energy in the veins of the sky and urged the wooden raft to quickly move towards the ship. When it got closer, I could clearly see that it was a fishing boat and there were only 2 to 3 people on it. I turned around and nodded to the 2 of them. The 3 of us simultaneously soared into the sky and flew towards the fishing boat. After a few seconds, we steadily landed on the fishing boat. Immediately after, we split up and knocked all of the people on the boat unconscious and locked them in the cabin. Then, we drove the fishing boat toward the coast. The next day, when the sun had just risen, we reached the shore. At that moment, we weren't standing on Langya platform, but on an almost abandoned port. We didn't stay here for long, but immediately took a taxi to Shenzhen. When we returned to Shenzhen, it was already the next night. At this time, the shop was already closed, so we could only jump and fly upstairs. As soon as our feet stepped on the balcony, a strong Tao energy formed an attack that came at us. I quickly dodged the attack and then shouted, "It's me." As soon as I said that, a bare-chested man covered in sweat walked out of the house. This person was Jean Canwin. When he saw me, he was delighted, and then asked, "Did you get the thing?" I nodded. Previously, when I went to Billuo Mountain, I had already informed him about the Kuei oxbone through the sound-transmitting talisman. He let out a long sigh of relief and casually turned on the light in the room. Then, he asked me what had happened and why it had taken so long. After I told him the whole story in detail, I asked him why he had such a big reaction when we returned. He wiped the sweat off his body and said, "Previously, the people from Mount Longhu came over. I was just adjusting my breathing and was in a trance, so I mistook you for them." After hearing that, I was stunned at first and then asked, "Why did the people from Mount Longhu come? Could it be that they came for little Wangli?" Zhang Qianwen waved his hand and said, "I don't think so. At that time, the few old men who came specifically asked to see you. They also told you to be tactful and go to Mount Longhu to apologize." This made me a little confused. During this period of time, I didn't have much interaction with Mount Longhu. So where did the word apologize come from? Thinking of this, I asked, "Did they say anything?" Chapter 752. Listening to what the fatty said, it wasn't impossible. When we came out Chio's tomb, we happened to meet the young Taoist from Mount Longhu in the woods. I remembered that I had tricked him to return to the sect. Maybe he didn't find any trace of his martial uncles when he returned, so he became suspicious. From this, it seemed that the people from Mount Longhu had come to me for this matter. But on second thought, the conflict between me and Mount Longhu wasn't limited to just this 1 or 2 times. Once there were enough lice, one wouldn't be afraid of an itch. Soldiers come, generals will deal with it. Thus, I waved my hand, indicating that we shouldn't talk about it for the time being. After talking for a while, everyone dispersed. Before leaving, Jean Kinwin glanced at me as if he wanted to say something. I knew what he wanted to ask, but I didn't have much information about it. Tomorrow, we would have to use the evil spirit to save Wang Li. That was why I had to promise him that I would tell him after I finished reading the materials so that he could be prepared. After Jean Canwin left, I called the evil spirit into the room and asked him how confident he was in saving little Wang Li. When I mentioned this matter, the evil spirit's face changed. He looked at me with a smile and said, "If there are no abnormalities, I will definitely be able to retrieve the last wisp of soul." But halfway through his words, he looked troubled. I hurriedly asked him, so he continued, "This time, I need to leave for a period of time to recover my strength. I can't accompany you." Then he cupped his fists at me and looked at me as if waiting for my decision. Although his face was a little cold, I knew that he must want to recover his strength as soon as possible. To him, little Wang Li's life might not be important. Recovering his strength was the top priority. His way of thinking seemed to me to be quite reasonable, and I didn't mean to reproach him. From what he had said, he was ready to leave after saving little Wang Li. I asked him why he was in such a hurry. After listening to me, his face returned to its previous cold expression, and he explained to me. The Kuei ox skull we brought back was to make a Kuei ox altar similar to the one in the goddess temple. The evil spirit had to go through the Kuei ox altar to enter little Wang Li's chest. Then, he absorbed the last wisp of Qi Yu's soul in the 9 underworlds. Before he recovered his strength, he couldn't leave the 9 underworlds. That's why he said goodbye to me. After saying this, I felt both happy and worried. He was glad that little Wang Li was finally able to fully recover this time and escape the control of the black smoke ghost mask. In this way, the lineage of Mount One could be passed on. This also reduced a lot of Jean Canwin's burden. The worrisome part was that I didn't know if the sacrificial evil spirit would be in any danger when he returned to the 9 hells. He was my most reliable helper, and I would need his help in many things in the future. I definitely couldn't lose him. Thinking about this, I asked him, "How dangerous is this trip to the Netherworld meeting?" He shook his head and didn't say anything else. The more he acted like this, the more uneasy I felt. If he didn't go, he wouldn't be able to save little Wang Li, and he wouldn't be able to restore his strength. Or if he went, he would be afraid of being in danger. It was hard to choose between the two. I didn't know what to say, so I sat on the bed, feeling very upset. The sacrificial evil spirit didn't linger in my room and quietly left. Before he left, he told me to find him tomorrow morning to discuss the preparation of the sacrificial altar. The next day, I got up early. First, I want to check on little Wang Li. He was still sleeping, so I didn't wake him up. Instead, I gently untied his clothes and observed the condition of his chest. After confirming that it hadn't worsened, I left the room. At this time, Zhang Canwen came to help little Wang Li recuperate. Seeing me come out of the room, he asked, "Lear, are you awake?" I shook my head and pulled him to the living room to sit down. I asked him about little Wang Li's recent situation. After listening to me, he told me about little Wang Li's condition in detail. Combined with what I had just seen, little Wang Li had gotten better recently. However, in the end, Zhang Canwen sighed and said, "I really hope that this is the last time I'll help him recuperate." Then, he turned to look at me, his eyes full of hope. I had seen the amount of effort Zhang Canwen had spent on little Wang Li for the past year. He had long regarded little Wang Li as his own child. This was completely different from Zhang Canwen, who had said that he wanted to get rid of little Wang Li. It really moved me. While we were talking, Wang Kuan and his wife came in. When they saw me sitting on the sofa with Zhang Canwen, they were overjoyed. Wang Kuan immediately rushed over and grabbed my hand tightly. Tears welled up in his eyes. "Mr. Zhou, when did you come back? Why didn't you tell me that I was going to pick you up?" As soon as I said that, Wang Kuan's wife asked, "Mr. Zhou, did you bring the things back? Is there hope for my son?" After Wang Kuan heard that, he immediately turned around and winked at her, signaling her to shut up. She was shocked. She lowered her head and didn't speak anymore. Seeing that, I understood. Zhang Canwen must have told them that I had gone to find the Kuei cow. That was why Wang Kuan's wife had asked that question. I understood his wife's reaction. I knew what little Wang Li meant to them, so I didn't mind it. On the other hand, I was touched by Wang Kuan's actions. Originally, when we had gone to Tower Village, we had been prepared to die. Although I hadn't told anyone in the shop about this, Wang Kuan had probably sensed it when he had sent me off at the airport. That was why Wang Kuan had asked me if there was anything wrong instead of asking about the Kuei cow. It comforted me. I asked them to calm down first. Then, I told them that I was going to build the Kuei cow altar. Finally, I comforted them. If nothing unexpected happens, little Wang Li will be cured this time. After hearing that, the two of them shed tears of gratitude. They immediately wanted to kneel and kowtow to me. Since ancient times, only the heaven, earth, and master have been bowed to by others. How could I let them bow to me like that? I quickly stopped them. Wang Kuan's face was unusually excited. He immediately called his uncle, Wang Yongjun, to tell him that I had returned. Less than half an hour after I hung up the phone, Wang Yongjun rushed over. The first thing he did when he saw me was to ask if there were any injuries. Wang Yongjun was indeed a businessman. His method of winning people's hearts was really brilliant. I waved my hand to show that I was okay. Then, he asked if there was any change in little Wang Li's situation. I told him what I had told him, word for word. Then he calmed down. At the same time, the evil sacrificial spirit came out and stood not far from me. He didn't utter a word. Seeing this, I remembered what he had told me last night. However, there were many people here, so it wasn't good to discuss this matter. In the end, Wang Yongjun's eyes were sharp. He saw the slight change in my face. He called Wang Kuan and his wife downstairs to prepare breakfast for us. After everyone left, the evil sacrificial spirit came over. I called the fatty and Zhang Canwen over to discuss this matter. In this matter, the evil sacrificial spirit had the absolute right to speak. However, when I asked him how to build the Kuei cow altar, he looked puzzled and said that he didn't know. This surprised me. However, I suddenly remembered Lu Ruxu, who was still hiding in the ancient scroll with the green lamp. He was the one who had built the Kuei cow altar in the Holy Mother Temple. Thinking of this, I immediately summoned Lu Ruxu. A few seconds later, Lu Ruxu appeared in front of me. This was the first time I had seen him after coming out of the underground palace. I didn't expect that his soul had already solidified. It seemed that he had recovered well in the ancient scroll with the green lamp. As soon as he saw me, he bowed and greeted me, "Master." Then, he asked me why I had summoned him. I didn't reply to him and just introduced Jean Canwen, who was sitting next to me, to him. Then, I told Jean Canwen about Lu Rux's identity. Jean Canwen immediately stood up and cupped his hands towards Lu Ruxu. "So, it's a senior from Mount Longhu. My apologies." Seeing this, Lu Ruxu cupped his hands in return, saying that the past wasn't worth mentioning. I gestured for Lu Ruxu to sit down. Then, I asked him about the Kuei Cow altar. From his mouth, I learned that the Kuei Cow altar had been found in an old book in the library when he was still at Mount Longhu. The book had introduced the use of the Kuei Cow altar. As we had guessed, the Kuei Cow altar could connect two unrelated places to achieve the purpose of shrinking the ground into inches. According to him, it wasn't difficult to build the Kuei Cow altar, but to connect the two places, we had to first find something in that place to act as attraction. Only then could the Kuei Cow altar be truly effective. I roughly understood what he meant. In other words, if we wanted to communicate with the world in Little Wang Li's body, we had to find something that existed in Little Wang Li's chest to act as a guide. However, we clearly knew that the deep place in Little Wang Li's chest was the Nine Nether. How could we go to the Nine Nether as a living person? Chapter 753. I paused and told Lu Ruxu that I would think of a way to receive him. I asked him to focus on building the altar. Then I asked him when he would be able to build it and what preparations he needed to make. I didn't expect him to say that he only needed the Kuei ox skull. The Kuei ox was an ancient beast, and its body contained a lot of energy. When he had built the Kuei ox altar in the Holy Mother Temple, he had spent a lot of time looking for things related to Chiyu, but he hadn't done anything to the Kuei ox skull. After listening to him, I understood that the key to the matter was the evil sacrificial spirit. I turned to look at the evil sacrificial spirit, then walked over and asked him in a low voice, "Are you sure?" After getting his confirmation, I took the Kuei ox skull out of the Shangliu bag and put on the tea table. Jean Canwen was surprised. "Is this the ancient beast, the Kuei ox? Why does it look like a deer's head?" I didn't respond to him but turned to Lu Ruxu and asked, "Is the skull enough?" Seeing him nod, I mobilized the true chi in my body. With a wave of my hand, I erased all the skin and flesh on the Kuei ox's head, leaving only the dark green skull shining. Everyone exclaimed in surprise. I was stunned when I saw this. It seemed that Lu Ruxu was right. The Kuei ox's skull contained extremely powerful energy. After everyone observed it for a while, I handed the Kuei ox skull to the evil sacrificial spirit and reminded him to be careful. He took the skull and turned to walk toward Little Wang Li's room, but I reached out and grabbed his arm. He turned to look at me without any expression on his face. "Is there anything else?" I originally wanted to ask him not to hurt Little Wang Li for the sake of recovering his strength, but I felt that it wasn't appropriate for me to say it. My throat moved, but I didn't say anything. He seemed to have guessed what I wanted to say. He nodded and said, "I know what I'm doing." Then, he turned to enter the room and told me not to let anyone disturb him. I nodded. In the current situation, I could only trust the evil sacrificial spirit. When everyone saw the evil sacrificial spirit enter Little Wang Li's room with the Kuei ox skull, they didn't know what was going on. Jean Canwen was confused. He immediately stood up as if he wanted to question me. Before he could speak, I waved my hand and interrupted him. Then, I explained to everyone, there are some things that I can't say, but I have to leave them to him. Jean Canwen was obviously a little worried about the sacrificial evil spirit. Normally, the sacrificial evil spirit would appear in the form of a small zombie. Previously, when the small zombies didn't have intelligence, it was fine. But now, the evil sacrificial spirit was in his body and was like a normal person. Jean Canwen didn't know anything about the evil sacrificial spirit. To let the evil sacrificial spirit of the evil sacrificial spirit enter alone at such a critical moment made him suspicious. To do it, I told him to be of. I knew what he of it. However, no one could do anything about it. For the evil sacrificial spirit of us could do. Just as Jean Canwin was about to ask, I sensed a strong wave of which energy coming from little Wang Li's room. It seemed that the evil sacrificial spirit had taken action. Then, I heard little Wang Li crying. Hearing the cries, Jean Canwin immediately frowned. He took a few steps and was about to rush in. I hadn't reacted yet. Fortunately, the fatty took the lead and stopped him. Fatty always had absolute trust in me under any circumstances, adding on to the fact that he had previously seen the power of the sacrificial evil spirit at Lubo Hill. Although he didn't ask me, I could feel that he already knew something. Maybe he was waiting for me to tell him personally. So, it wasn't strange that the fatty would make a move on me. On the contrary, when Jean Canwin saw that the fatty had stopped him, he mobilized the Taoist energy in his body to attack the fatty. However, as soon as he raised his hand, he gritted his teeth and retracted it. He turned to look at me, his eyes filled with anger. I had never seen Jean Canwin like this. But after thinking about it, it was reasonable for him to have such a reaction. Over the past year, he and little Wang Li had been companions day and night. Maybe in his eyes, the relationship between him and little Wang Li had already surpassed that of a master and disciple. It could even be compared to a father-son relationship. Thinking of this, I walked forward and patted Jean Canwin's shoulder. "Brother Jean, do you believe me?" Perhaps he knew what I was going to say next, so he hurriedly replied, "These are two different things." Before I could speak again, little Wang Li's crying in the room became even more intense. I couldn't bear to listen to it anymore. One could imagine how much pain little Wang Li was suffering at this moment. When Jean Canwin, who was in front of me, heard the crying, his aura surged, and he wanted to rush in again. Seeing this, I cursed inwardly. If he were to rush in and disturb the evil, sacrificial spirit's casting, it might backfire. Thinking of this, I formed a seal with both hands. While Jean Canwin had no time to pay attention to me, I gently pressed on his neck. Taoist energy surged out and knocked him out. Seeing this, the fatty heaved a sigh of relief. I wiped the sweat off my face and called the fatty to carry Jean Canwin to the sofa. At this moment, Wang Kuin and his wife were shouting at the door. Perhaps little Wang Li's crying had startled them. I shook my head and opened the door. There was a group of people at the door. Besides Wang Kuin and his wife, Wang Yongjun and Xie Lu were also there. As soon as the door was opened, Wang Kuin anxiously asked what had happened and why little Wang Li was crying so hard. Then he saw Jean Canwin lying on the ground and wanted to rush to little Wang Li's room. Seeing this, I shouted and stopped them. Wang Yongjun noticed that my expression wasn't right. He pulled Wang Kuin and his wife and said, "Mr. Zhou, I'm really sorry. We were too rash." After saying that, he pulled the couple and was about to go back. At first, Wang Kuin didn't want to leave. After Wang Yongjun scolded him, he cupped his hands at me and prepared to leave. At this moment, little Wang Li's cries in the house suddenly stopped, followed by a cracking sound, as if something had broken. At the same time, I couldn't feel the existence of shaman energy in the room. My heart sank. I wasn't sure if the sacrificial evil spirit had succeeded or if something had happened. I called the people who were about to leave and rushed to little Wang Li's room. I exerted my strength, and the wooden door flew far away. Then I saw little Wang Li lying on the bed. He was laughing and waving his arms and legs in the air. However, the evil sacrificial spirit was nowhere to be seen. The room was a mess, and white bones were scattered on the ground. Seeing this, my heart tightened. At first, I thought that something had happened to the evil sacrificial spirit. The broken bones on the ground should be his remains. However, after thinking about it carefully, it didn't seem right. The evil sacrificial spirit had possessed the body of the little zombie. This little zombie was a corpse spirit made of mysterious energy. Its body was much stronger than I had imagined. It couldn't have been broken that easily. Moreover, I didn't feel the aura of the evil sacrificial spirit in the room. It could only prove that he had disappeared from this place. Perhaps he had gone to the netherworld as he had told me. With this thought, I hurried to check little Wang Li's body. He wasn't hurt at all. The depression on his chest had returned to the shape of a normal person, and the dark energy on it had disappeared. I exhaled in relief. I was sure that the evil sacrificial spirit was all right. I held little Wang Li in my arms and swayed him back and forth. Little Wang Li's chubby little face cracked into a smile, which made me happy. At this moment, Wang Kuan and his wife, who were standing behind me, opened their eyes wide. They were dumbstruck when they saw the situation in the room. Then, they looked at little Wang Li in their arms and didn't move. I handed little Wang Li to them. Little Wang Li has fully recovered. He just needs to rest for a few days. After listening to me, the husband and wife were bewildered. They couldn't react. Wang Yongjun took the initiative to kneel in front of me. With tears and snot on his face, he thanked me. Wang Kuan and his wife moved. They also wanted to kneel. According to age, Wang Yongjun was his father's generation. How could I accept his kowtow? I quickly pulled him back and called out to Wang Kuan and his wife. However, Wang Yongjun didn't let me stop him. He said that they were bowing on behalf of little Wang Li to thank me for saving their lives. After hearing his words, I felt at ease and accepted the kowtow. After I helped them up, I returned to the living room. At this moment, Zhang Kanwen had already shakily stood up. Seeing that Wang Kuan's wife was holding little Wang Li, he immediately rushed over and took little Wang Li to check. After confirming that little Wang Li had recovered, he couldn't help but cry tears of joy and bow to me. I quickly interrupted him. Big brother Zhang, you don't have to do this. Zhang Kanwen persisted. After a stalemate with me, he handed little Wang Li to Wang Kuan and said to me, Mount Wen's lineage has received a great favor. I, Zhang Kanwen, am willing to do anything for you in the future. Then he saluted me with his hands in front of his chest. I hurriedly stopped him. Big brother Zhang, you're exaggerating. Little Wang Li is also my martial nephew. Saving him is my duty. Moreover, when Lord Zhao was on his deathbed, I promised him that I would definitely protect the inheritance of Mount Wen's lineage. How can I feel at ease if you do this? Then, Zhang Kanwen nodded and took back what he had just said. However, he immediately said that if I needed his help in the future, he could just ask me. I didn't refuse and accepted it. At this time, the atmosphere in the living room became relaxed with little Wang Li's recovery. Looking at their smiling faces, I couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief. Little Wang Li's matter was finally over, but I couldn't be happy. The fat man on the side seemed to have read my mind. He walked out of the crowd and patted my shoulder. Third baby, you're worried about that little zombie, right? I nodded and didn't avoid it. Then, Fatty spoke again. Although I don't know what's going on between the two of you, I can tell that he's very strong. Perhaps all of us are no match for him, and he's very important to you. Chapter 754. Seeing that my complexion didn't improve, the fatty asked me in a low voice if I needed to perform a divination for the evil spirit. Hearing this, I couldn't help but feel happy. But then I thought that although the fatty's divination was powerful, the danger he faced was also great. Last time, the fatty had performed a divination in order to go to Pagoda Village. In the end, he was punished by the heavens and almost lost his life. I knew that he was kind enough to make me feel at ease. If I really nodded, he would definitely perform a divination regardless of the consequences. Thinking of this, I shook my head at the fatty and said, "It's better not. The little zombie has his own fortune." I said this to comfort myself. The evil spirit returning to the 9 underworlds was his own choice. If something really happened, I thought that with his strength, he would be able to escape smoothly. After thinking about it, I didn't want to dwell on this matter anymore and put it to the back of my mind for the time being. At this time, the originally lively room had quietened down. Wang Yongjun walked in front of me and said that he was going to book a banquet at the hotel. Firstly, it was to welcome the fatty and me, and secondly, it was to celebrate little Wang Li's recovery. Little Wang Li's matter was indeed worth celebrating. and I had no objection to this. Seeing that I nodded, Wang Yongjun immediately made arrangements. Half an hour later, everyone arrived at the hotel. A group of people drank at the table until evening. We didn't deliberately use Tao energy to expel the alcohol in our bodies. Under such circumstances, Zhang Canwen, who had always been calm, drank a little too much. It was likely that he had resolved little Wang Li's matter. After he got drunk, he knelt on the ground and cried in the direction of Meizhou. I didn't know what he was saying. Early the next morning, I knocked on Zhang Canwen's door and talked to him about little Wang Li's apprenticeship. Although Zhang Canwen and little Wang Li were now master and disciple, they hadn't formally performed the apprenticeship ceremony. Now that little Wang Li's body had recovered, this matter should be done immediately while I could still stay here for a few more days. After listening to my words, he nodded without hesitation and said, "It's indeed time to do it. It's also good to comfort Master's soul in heaven." After receiving Zhang Canwen's reply, I informed Wang Kuen's family of the matter and decided to hold the apprenticeship ceremony in 3 days. In the next few days, the shop did not open for business. Everyone was busy with little Wang Li's apprenticeship. The people of China have always respected their masters. The apprenticeship ceremony was of utmost importance and could not be sloppy. The traditional relationship between master and disciple was second only to the relationship between father and son. As the saying goes, my parents gave birth to me, and my master taught me. And joining a master is like being reincarnated. In some professions, once the apprentice entered the sect, the apprentice would be taught by the master. Parents had no right to interfere, and they might not even meet. Establishing such an important relationship naturally required solemn customs and etiquette to confirm and protect it. The people of China have a long tradition of respecting their masters. Therefore, the Zhou dynasty has a custom of honoring their masters. However, there had never been any special etiquette for apprenticeships. Confucius said, "I have not failed to instruct those who have cultivated themselves to a higher level." It seemed that the establishment of a relationship between a junior and a junior brother was relatively simple. It was just a ceremony of admiration, supplemented by cultivation. It was a kind of personal relationship. The pre-Qin scholars' private lectures were mostly like this. According to traditional etiquette, the location of the apprenticeship ceremony should have been the former residence of Lord Zhao in Meizhou. But that place had already been burned down by me, and now it was in ruins. After thinking about it, the apprenticeship ceremony could only be held in my feng shui shop. Since Zhang Canwen no longer held a position in the Metaphysics Society, the apprenticeship ceremony was a little quiet. However, it didn't matter, and it saved me a lot of trouble. Zhang Canwen sat in the main hall with a portrait of Prime Minister when hanging behind him. I cupped my hands towards the portrait and couldn't help but think of the scene when Zhang Canwen became a heavenly master. That indomitable figure was wearing a moon-white gown. He used his bony hands to support a prosperous era. Under the portrait of Prime Minister, one were the memorial tablets of the ancestors of Zhang Canwen's branch. These days, Zhang Canwen had locked himself in his room. He must have been busy with this matter. When the auspicious hour arrived, Zhang Canwen got up and kneeled in front of the memorial tablets. He read aloud, "Disciple Zhang Canwen is here today to accept a disciple and extend the inheritance of Mount Wen. I hope the ancestors will grant me this." Then he bowed 3 times and kowtowed 9 times. Then he took the incense stick from my hand and placed it on the table. 3 columns of green smoke rose straight up without any ripples. This meant that Zhang Canwen had obtained permission from the sect to accept a disciple. Seeing this, he finally felt relieved and sat down. Then the apprenticeship ceremony officially began. Wang Kuen carried little Wang Li over and placed him on the praying mat in front of Zhang Canwen. Little Wang Li was already a year old, and his physical strength was incomparable to that of an ordinary child. In addition, the child was obedient and sensible. He knelt motionlessly on the praying mat and was very well behaved. Zhang Canwen walked forward and touched little Wang Li's head. He said with a loving expression, "Lear, according to reason, I should give you a name, but my mountain lineage has never had such a rule. When you were in trouble, I gave you this name. There's no need to give you a name." Little Wang Li suddenly blinked his big eyes and stared at Zhang Canwen, making him smile from ear to ear. Then he carried little Wang Li and bowed in front of the ancestors' memorial tablet. The apprenticeship ceremony was completed just like that. I was gratified to see that the Mount Wen lineage had a successor. Then I handed the Yin Yang Yama brush and the mystic Yin ruler to Zhang Canwen from the Shangyu pouch. Seeing me like this, Zhang Canwen asked, "Brother Zhou Yi, why are you doing this?" I pinched little Wang Li's little face and replied with a smile, "I can be considered little Wang Li's martial uncle. This is the treasure of your Mount Wen lineage. Today, I'll take this opportunity to return it to you as a gift to little Wang Li." Hearing what I said, Zhang Canwen was silent for a moment, but he couldn't hide the gratitude on his face. In the end, he nodded and accepted the 2 items. Back then, Lord Zhao had indeed said that he would give me the Yin Yang Yama brush, but in this situation, Zhang Canwen obviously needed these 2 magic artifacts more than me. That night, I called Fatty to my room to discuss the next trip to Crouching Buddha Temple. I didn't do it on a whim. When I saw the changes in Lu Ruxu a few days ago, I secretly asked him. He said that he was recuperating in the Green Lamp Ancient Scroll, but he suddenly noticed that there was a change in the Ancient Scroll. It seemed to have something to do with the Buddha beads. After I asked him in detail, I confirmed what he said. As long as the Buddha beads and the Ancient Scroll were placed together, there would be a reaction between the 2. From this, I concluded that if I wanted to open the second half of the Death Scripture, I had to go to Crouching Buddha Temple. Moreover, my strength had been stuck at the middle stage of the Seal Heavenly Master for a long time. The previous half of the Death Scripture didn't have any cultivation methods after becoming a Heavenly Master. I had to find a way to open the second half as soon as possible. After listening to my words, Fatty said that he had nothing to do at the moment and could come with me. After listening to him, I made up my mind and decided to leave the next day. Early the next morning, I informed everyone in the shop of my itinerary. They also knew that I had a lot of things to do, so they didn't ask me to stay. They just reminded me to come back early. Then, Wang Kun drove us to the airport. Before leaving, he gave us 2 bank cards, saying that Wang Yongjun had asked me to take care of things on the way. I didn't stand on ceremony and accepted it. Then, I took Fatty to the plane to Beijing. Crouching Buddha Temple, also known as Shifang Pujua Temple, was located at the southern foot of Shou and mountain in the north of Xishan. During the Jingguan period of the Tang Dynasty, 627 to 649, it was originally called Tushita Temple. Tushita was a transliteration of Sanskrit, which meant contentment or contentment. The Yuan dynasty was the turning point in the temple's development. Starting from Emperor Yingzong, for successive emperors expanded the temple. In the 7th year of Yenyu, 1320, in the 9th month of Jiashan, Emperor Yingzong built the Shou and Mountain Temple and gave 10 million strings of coins. In the 1st year of Zhiji, 1321, in the 1st month, Emperor Yingzong built a Buddhist temple on Mount Shou and then set up a treasury to manage the wealth. In the 3rd month, the army built a temple on Mount Shoan. In the 12th month, they smelted 500,000 kilograms of copper to make a Shou and Buddhist statue. In the 1st year of Tating, 1324, Emperor Yingzong built a Buddhist temple on Mount Shoan. In the 1st year of Tianli, 1328, Emperor Yingzong built a Buddhist temple on Mount Shoan. In the 3rd year, it was changed to the Zhao Shao camp. In the 1st month of the 2nd year of Jishuan, 1331, Emperor Yingzong ordered Zaldi and the other governors to build the temple on the grounds that the temple on Mount Shou and hadn't been completed. Then, he ordered Lu Yuanliang and 24,000 people to work in the Zhao Shao temple on Mount Shoan. In the Ming dynasty, the temple was renovated 5 times and received the emperor 6 times. It was the temple's heyday. At the end of the Ming dynasty and the beginning of the Qing dynasty, society was in turmoil. Pujua Temple was neglected for a period of time. It wasn't until the reign of Emperor Yongzheng of the Qing dynasty that Prince Yi Yunxiang donated money to renovate the temple. Pujua Temple was revived. I sat on the sofa in the hotel room and read through the documents in my hands. I didn't find anything interesting, but then again, the greats secluded themselves in the city. The crouching Buddha temple had been exposed to the world for more than 1,000 years, but no secrets had been leaked. It was clear that the crouching Buddha temple was more mysterious than I had imagined. At this moment, the fat man pushed the door open and entered the room. I saw his serious face. It seemed he had something to discuss with me, so I asked him. The fat man paused then said, "When I was shopping, I saw a monk meditating downstairs. I paid attention to him and came back to ask for your opinion." The fat man had been with me for many years, so he had learned to be more cautious. After listening to him, I didn't respond. Instead, I pondered. We were in the territory of the crouching Buddha temple, and monks could be seen everywhere. However, I heard that the crouching Buddha temple had strict rules. If they weren't on a mission, they wouldn't allow their disciples to stay outside. From the fat man's words, it was clear that the monk was waiting for someone. Thinking about this, I immediately thought that the monk was coming for us. It seemed that they already knew when we arrived. The intelligence work of the crouching Buddha temple was really shocking. I called the fat man to go downstairs with me to meet the monk. When we arrived in front of him, the monk opened his eyes and slowly stood up. He put his palms together and said, "Your Excellency must be Benefactor Zhou Yi. This little monk has been waiting for a long time." I imitated him and nodded at him. Reverend is an eminent monk of the crouching Buddha temple. Chapter 755. After listening to him, I nodded and signaled him to lead the way. We then headed toward the crouching Buddha temple. However, Monk Shanwu's body only paused for a moment and did not move. Instead, he opened his mouth and said, "Before going down the mountain, my master had warned me that almsgiver Zhou has a Buddhist keepsake on you. I need to confirm it before you can go up the mountain." After listening to him, I frowned. After thinking for a while, I felt that his request was reasonable. The crouching Buddha temple had many secrets, so it wouldn't hurt to be cautious. However, I had just obtained the crouching Buddha beads not long ago. How did Monk Miao Ju know about it? Since I couldn't figure out, I didn't delve deeper into it. I just extended my hand and handed the beads to him. Monk Shanwu received it and looked at it. His eyes flashed and his arms slightly trembled. After taking a deep breath, he hastily returned the Buddhist beads to me and bowed to me. My apologies, my apologies. Benefactor, please follow this little monk up the mountain." After saying that, he strode forward and took the lead to the entrance of the hotel. Our hotel was only half an hour's drive from the crouching Buddha temple. Since there were no cars on the mountain, we stopped at the foot of the mountain. Along the way, Monk Shan Wu told me about the origin of the crouching Buddha temple. I had read about it in the materials he had mentioned before, so I didn't pay much attention to it. I just whispered in agreement. The crouching Buddha temple was worthy of being a 1,000-year-old temple. It had an endless stream of worshippers. I was afraid it would be even more crowded during the temple fair. Fortunately, the crouching Buddha temple wasn't like the Mount Lao we had visited before. It didn't have any restrictions. Thinking about Mount Lao, I was surprised. I had promised the sect master of Mount Lao that I would return the Eastern Emperor Bell. However, I had been focused on solving Wang Li's matter and had forgotten about it. It seemed we couldn't stay in the crouching Buddha temple for long. We had to return at Tsingtao as soon as possible to avoid any unforeseen events. While I was thinking, Monk Shan Wu brought us to a hall. There were a few big Sanskrit words on the ceiling of the hall. According to Monk Shan Wu, this hall was called the Heavenly King Hall. There were 6 Buddha statues inside. Maitreya Buddha, the 4 heavenly kings, and Wei Tuo Bodhisattva. Although I don't know much about Buddhism, I have heard a little about these Buddha statues. This Maitreya Buddha is also called Maitreya Bodhisattva, which translates as See I Sure, transliterates as Mei Liya, Mei Liyao, one of the 8 great bodhisattvas of Buddhism. In the Mahayana Buddhist scriptures, he is often called Ayita Bodhisattva. He is the successor of Shakyamuni Buddha and is often honored as Maitreya Buddha. However, The four heavenly kings of Buddhism were not the four that ordinary people knew of above the heavenly court. The four heavenly kings were the guardians of Buddhism, also known as the four heavenly kings of world protectors. They were the four heavenly deities of the 20 heavens of Buddhism, located in the first heaven of the Saha world of desire. The first layer of heaven was also called the four heavenly king heaven, and it was located on the four peaks halfway up Mount Meru. According to monk Shan Wu's introduction, the four heavenly kings were the Dhritarashtra of the east, whose name was Darosa. He lived on the east side of Mount Meru, and his land was gold. The southern heavenly king of growth, whose name was Pili Li, lived on the south side of Mount Meru, and his land was gold. The western heavenly king of Verpka lived on the west side of Mount Meru, and his land was silver. The last Skanda Bodhisattva was also known as Skanda Bodhisattva. His Sanskrit name was transliterated as Private Jantua Deva, meaning in sky. He was originally a deity of the Indian Brahmanism, and later became a guardian deity of Buddhism. According to legend, the Skanda Bodhisattva statue had two main shapes. One was a pair of palms with both hands holding a Vajra pestle, and the other was a single hand holding a Vajra pestle. The two shapes of the Skanda Bodhisattva statue had different meanings. The one holding the pestle with both hands meant that the temple welcomed wandering monks from all over the world. The one holding the pestle with only one hand meant that the temple didn't welcome foreign monks. Wandering monks only needed to look at the Skanda Bodhisattva statue to know if they were welcome or not. Monk Shan Wu clasped his hands and bowed toward the hall. He didn't say anything else but stood next to me. It seemed he was waiting for me to do something. I knew what he was thinking at first glance. He was waiting for me to pay my respects to the Bodhisattva statue. However, I didn't expect that Shan Wu, who had been so respectful to me in the hotel, would try to intimidate me. He knew that I was a feng shui master, which came from the same origin as Taoist priests. My faith was different from that of Buddhism, but he still wanted to make things difficult for me. Moreover, the conflict between Buddhism and Taoism had existed since ancient times. Moreover, the popularity of Buddhism was something that Taoism couldn't compare to. He wanted to show off in front of me. With this thought, I didn't pay attention to him. I took the fatty and walked in another direction. Monk Shan Wu didn't say anything, but I could see a trace of displeasure on his face. However, the more displeased he was, the happier I was. Perhaps this monk had found a way to deal with us. He didn't hurry to take us to see Miaojue. Instead, he took us around the Heavenly King Hall and went to the Three Lives Buddhist Hall. The Three Lives Buddhist Hall was also called the Mahavira Hall. It was the highest among all the halls. On the front door of the hall hung a wooden board written by Emperor Yongzheng that read, Twin Woods Sui Jing. On both sides of the door were couplets inscribed by Emperor Qianlong. The green bamboos and yellow flowers in the Buddhist forest are empty and beautiful. The treasured lantern and pearls in the Buddhist space are profound and solemn. If Monk Shan Wu wanted to tease me, I couldn't show my impatience. Although I had an important matter to attend to, I wasn't in a hurry. With this thought in mind, I followed Shan Wu to stroll around the hall. From him, I learned that the three Buddhas in this hall were the Amitabha Buddha of the Western Pure Land of Ultimate Bliss, the Shakyamuni Buddha of the Saha world, and the Medicine Buddha of the Eastern Pure Glaze world. I couldn't help but remember that Miaojue had told me that the witch energy in my body was the Buddha power of the ancient Dipamkara Buddha. According to Buddhism, the three Buddhas were in charge of mankind. They were divided into the past Buddha, Dipamkara Buddha, the present Buddha was Shakyamuni Buddha, and the future Buddha was Maitreya Buddha. I didn't know why the witch energy in my body was related to Dipamkara Buddha. After Monk Shan Wu finished his speech, we didn't move. He sped up and said, I'm going to take you to see Miaojue. The fat man also saw the situation. His big face turned red. Soon, we arrived at the main hall of the reclining Buddha temple, the reclining Buddha hall. This Buddhist hall was 3 rooms wide. It had a single eave and a yellow glazed roof. Under the eaves was a 5-colored dogong, and the ceiling was decorated with colorful flowers. On the front of the door, there was a big inscription that read, The nature of the moon is always bright. On both sides there were couplets that read, "With the Bodhi heart seal, all dharmas follow your will, and those who live long will help all sentient beings." Above the Buddhist hall, there was a horizontal inscription that read, "Great Freedom." After entering the hall, we saw a big Buddha statue. The bronze Buddha statue was lying on its side on the couch. Its head was to the west, and its feet were to the east. It was facing the south, and its eyes were slightly closed. Its expression was serene, and its posture was even. The folds of its clothes were flowing smoothly. Its right arm was bent, and its right palm was supporting its head. Its left arm was straight, and its fingers were forming an auspicious seal. I had heard about the origin of this Buddha statue. It was said that it was the posture of Shakyamuni Buddha before he passed away outside the city of Naga in India. It depicted that when the Buddha was sick and couldn't get up, he gave his last teachings to his disciples under the Shura tree. It was the Buddhist story of Shakyamuni Nirvana. I was shocked by the solemn Buddha statue in front of me. I stood still in the hall for a long time. At this moment, I heard a voice behind me. "Benefactor Zhou, how have you been?" Hearing the familiar voice, I turned around and saw a man wearing a kasaya with a big Buddhist prayer beads hanging on his chest. He looked spirited. It was Monk Miaojua. I cupped my hands toward him and said, "Master Miaojua, long time no see." Monk Miaojua nodded at me and said, "Please forgive me for not welcoming you earlier. May I know if Benefactor has obtained that treasure?" Hearing this, I was startled. It was just as I had thought. When I was in the hotel, I was puzzled as to why Monk Shanwu said that I had a Buddhist keepsake. It turned out that Monk Miaojua already knew that I had the reclining Buddha beads. After thinking about it, I took out the Buddhist prayer beads and handed them to Monk Miaojua. Is this what Master is talking about? Unexpectedly, Monk Miaojua only glanced at the Buddhist prayer beads and didn't take them. Instead, he smiled and said, "There is one more thing." His words were somewhat unimaginable, but I immediately remembered that I had found the Buddhist prayer beads in Chiyo's tomb. However, there was another thing that I had found in Chiyo's tomb, the second part of the death scripture. However, there wasn't a single word on it, only an azure lamp. Previously, Lu Ruxu had told me that there was a connection between the azure lamp scroll and the Buddhist prayer beads. I immediately thought of the reclining Buddha temple. I didn't expect that Monk Miaojua would know about this. Thinking about this, my heart tightened. My eyes slightly focused as I said in a deep voice, "I don't know what Master is talking about." The fatty's eyes trembled when he saw my expression, and he stealthily moved 2 steps closer to me. Monk Miaojua seemed to have anticipated my reaction. He shook his head and said, "Benefactor, you don't need to be alarmed. This poor monk doesn't have any improper thoughts. It's just that this thing is related to Buddhism. If you want to comprehend it, you'll need Buddha's help." The meaning behind his words was just as I had expected. It was obvious that he already knew about it. In that case, it was meaningless whether I hid it or not. Thinking about this, my expression eased and I patted the fatty's shoulder. Only then did he move away from me. Then, I asked Monk Miaojua what he meant by his previous words. After listening to me, Monk Miaojua signaled us to follow behind him. We circled around the reclining Buddha temple and arrived at the back of the mountain. There were no signs of human habitation in the back of the mountain, and the ground was covered with weeds and withered trees. I didn't know why he brought us here. Before I could ask, Monk Miaojua closed his eyes and chanted the name of Buddha. Then he waved his hand, and the scenery in front of us changed. I didn't react for a moment, but the fatty next to me pulled my arm and pointed to a place in front of us. "Third baby, look at that pagoda. It looks a little strange." Chapter 756. Hearing this, my eyes couldn't help but light up. But in the blink of an eye, I calmed down. From Monk Miaoju's words, he wanted me to enter the Spirit Lock Tower. It seemed to be pointing out a clear path for me. But from his words, there seemed to be another meaning. He seemed to know what I was thinking as he kept staring at me with a smile on his face. His kind expression made me feel uncomfortable. After a long while, Monk Miaoju retracted his gaze and looked at the Spirit Lock Tower, saying, "I think Benefactor has already guessed that in order to open the green lamp scroll, you have to enter the Spirit Lock Tower. Before opening the Spirit Lock Tower, this poor monk would like to make a deal with Benefactor. Sure enough, Monk Miao Ju and I were strangers who met by chance, so it was normal for him to have a request. It would be strange if he was willing to help me for free. Moreover, although this monk looked kind, his cultivation wasn't ordinary. Moreover, this was his territory, so it wasn't easy to refuse. Thus, I nodded and asked him what his conditions were. After listening to my words, the monk also nodded and said with a smile, "The string of prayer beads that Benefactor took out earlier was lost in the Spirit Lock Tower. The reason is related to this temple's secret, so forgive this poor monk for not being able to tell you. As for the matter that this poor monk would like to ask Benefactor, it is related to these prayer beads. Benefactor only needs to go to the top of the Spirit Lock Tower and hang the prayer beads on the Buddha statue." Without waiting for me to speak, the fatty at the side seemed to find his words unbelievable and asked, "It's that simple?" After hearing his words, I frowned. What the monk said couldn't be so simple. Although I don't know what this Spirit Lock Pagoda is from the black gas surrounding it, it should be extremely dangerous. If it was really as simple as he said, then he could have asked for the Buddhist beads from me and personally hung them on the top of the pagoda to show his loyalty to Buddha. But he didn't do so, which proved that there was definitely danger inside. If you want to gain something, you must give up something. His condition was actually reasonable, but he didn't mention the danger and only mentioned the surface problem. This made me slightly unhappy and felt that this monk Miao Ju was quite scheming. Of course, this little bit of unhappiness wouldn't affect my decision. The problem of the second half of the death scripture had accumulated in my heart for a long time. Even if it was a mountain of daggers or a sea of flames, I still had to go. I took a deep breath and nodded, agreeing to his request. Monk Miao Ju smiled and didn't say anything. He brought us to the front of the Spirit Lock Tower. Previously, he had been standing quite far away, and the Spirit Lock Pagoda was shrouded in black gas, so he wasn't able to see its entire appearance. When he got closer, he realized that the pagoda had a total of 7 floors, and the surrounding black gas was mainly distributed in the top 3 floors. The surroundings of the pagoda were the same, and there was no entrance. Presumably, some secret technique was needed to open it. The black gas above the Spirit Lock Pagoda was like a huge black cloud, making people feel a little stifled. It added a bit of a strange atmosphere to the tilted Spirit Lock Pagoda. The fatty on the side could tell that something was wrong with the situation, so he pulled on my sleeve and whispered in my ear, "Third baby, this Spirit Lock Tower is very strange. How about we don't go in?" After that, he looked at Miao Ju with a solemn expression. I knew that fatty wasn't afraid of any danger inside, but he thought Monk Miao Ju would give me some trouble. Fatty's worries weren't unreasonable. After all, I didn't know much about Monk Miao Ju. But then again, Monk Miao Ju had helped me in the past. This time, I entered the Spirit Lock Tower because I had something to ask of him. I shouldn't be so suspicious of Monk Miao Ju. With that thought in mind, I whispered to the fatty, telling him not to worry and to guard the pagoda for me. I would enter the pagoda alone. The reason why I said that was because I wanted him to guard Monk Miao Ju from the outside. Secondly, there was definitely danger inside the pagoda. I wouldn't feel at ease if the fatty followed me inside. If I had said that directly to the fatty, he definitely wouldn't have been happy, but the excuse to have him watch over Miao Ju was very suitable. As expected, after hearing what I said, the fatty didn't doubt me. He turned to look at Monk Miao Ju vigilantly before nodding. "Third baby, don't worry. I will definitely help you look after this bald donkey." I patted his shoulder, then walked over and greeted Monk Miao Ju. "Master, please open the Spirit Lock Tower." After listening to me, Monk Miao Ju clasped his hands together and said, "Very good." Then he turned around and took off the Buddhist beads on his chest. He opened them with both hands and continuously chanted Buddhist scriptures. I took advantage of the time when he was performing the Buddhist ritual to size up the Spirit Lock Tower to increase my confidence. In Buddhism, there were 5-layered pagoda, 7-layered pagoda, 9-layered pagoda, and even 13-layered pagoda. The The spirit lock tower in front of me belonged to the 7-layered pagoda. It was said that these 7 floors came from the 7 treasures: gold, silver, colored glass, giant clam, agate, true pearl, and rose. Gold's nature was to follow one's fate and not change. It represented firm wisdom. Silver's nature was pure white. It represented tranquility and peace. Colored glass's nature was transparent. It represented clear wisdom. The giant clam's nature was to rotate. It represented grievance. Cultivators had to have a heart that could tolerate and yield. Agate's nature was variegated. There were red, yellow, and white. Because there were many colors, it represented the wisdom of all things. It was the so-called 10,000 virtues. The true pearl was round and bright, representing perfect and unhindered wisdom. Roses were jade stones that had a gentle nature and represented gentle wisdom. Using these 7 treasures to build a pagoda was called a pagoda. Each level of the pagoda was clearly defined. According to the system of ancient Indian Buddhism, the number of levels of the pagoda was equal to the number of Seong chakras in the pagoda. According to the 3 scriptures of Buddhism's 12 Karma Sutra, the number of Seong chakras is 1 chakra, 2 chakra, 3 chakra, 4 chakra, 5 arhat chakra, 6 chakra, 7 chakra, 8 chakra. Therefore, the spirit lock pagoda in front of them had 7 levels and 7 wheels. That meant that it was worshipping a bodhisattva. Previously, Monk Miaojua also mentioned that there was a Buddha statue at the top of the spirit lock pagoda. Presumably, that Buddha statue belonged to a certain bodhisattva. The 4 sides of the pagoda symbolize the 4 noble truths. The 6 sides symbolize the 6 paths of reincarnation. The 8 sides symbolize the 8 phases of Tao. The 12 sides symbolize the 12 karma, and so on. The odd levels of the pagoda represented purity and nobility in Buddhism. It seems that the 7 sides of the spirit lock pagoda symbolized the 7 floors pagoda. Seeing this, Monk Miaojua suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes emitted a Buddhist light, and the Buddhist beads on his hands were shining brightly. They rotated continuously in the air above his fingertips. This is the first time I've seen Monk Miaojua cast a spell. Previously, I've only seen him deal with Chun Yangting. But compared to that time, it was like heaven and earth. At this moment, Monk Miaojua's body was emitting a golden light that enveloped a radius of 100 meters. He looked like a majestic Buddhist statue. The black gas above the spirit lock pagoda was stimulated by the golden light and actually became active. It revolved around the pagoda as if it was resisting. In just a few seconds, the golden light on Monk Miaojua's body disappeared. Instead, the Buddhist beads on his fingertips became brighter. I heard him shout, and the Buddhist beads flew towards the spirit lock pagoda. In the blink of an eye, the Buddhist beads landed less than 5 meters away from the spirit lock pagoda. The Buddhist beads rotated rapidly in the air, and a golden door appeared below it. Seeing this, Monk Miaojua turned around and nodded at me. "Benefactor, please come in." After hearing that, I paused and prepared to move forward. At this moment, the fatty called out to me, "Third child, be careful." There was a trace of worry in the fatty's eyes, which warmed my heart. I waved my hand and strode towards the location of the Buddhist beads. Then, I pushed the door with both hands and leaped over. The place where I was standing should be the lowest level of the spirit lock pagoda. I couldn't see the golden door anymore. My surroundings were pitch black. Fortunately, I could still see 5 or 6 meters around me. The air on this level was mixed with a moldy smell that was slightly pungent. The spirit lock pagoda looked as if no one had ever been here before. There were no decorations, just an empty space with an endless darkness. I had forgotten to ask Monk Miaojua for a map of this place. I didn't know how long it would take for me to go upstairs. At this moment, I felt a wisp of Yin energy in the air. Instinctively, I stopped moving and scanned the surroundings. I was on guard against something that would suddenly appear. If there was Yin energy, it meant that there was a ghost on this floor. A ghost that had been imprisoned in the spirit lock pagoda and hadn't dissipated was definitely not weak. This ghost was elusive, and it was hard for me to find its whereabouts. I was afraid that it would be difficult to deal with it. However, it would be easy for Tong Tong to deal with it. With that thought, I prepared to call Tong Tong out. As soon as Tong Tong came out, she stared at me and asked, "What's wrong?" Before I could answer, her face stiffened and she said in a low voice, "Brother, the Een energy in this place is a little strange." Of course, I believed her. However, I had only sensed that there was Een energy here, and I didn't expect Tong Tong to say that. I asked, "Tong Tong, what did you sense?" Chapter 757. I couldn't help but feel nervous at this sudden attack. Tong Tong was still on guard. Seeing this, I didn't dare to be careless. I quickly took out the armor remover sword from my Xianglu pouch and held it in my hand. That beam of light was really strange. Although I had predicted that there would be danger before we entered the Spirit Lock Tower, I didn't think that it would be so elusive. I looked around vigilantly while asking Tong Tong what that beam of light was. Unexpectedly, Tong Tong didn't know. She just felt that the beam of light was very dangerous. Her vague answer made me confused. It wasn't a good idea to stay here for a long time, so I asked her to walk with our backs against each other. After a few steps, a red light flashed in the sky. However, this red light didn't attack us. It floated above our heads without moving. However, just because it didn't move didn't mean that it wasn't dangerous to us. I gathered the Tao energy in the veins of the sky and gathered it in my hands. I raised the armor remover sword and slashed at the red light. Perhaps it had sensed the danger, but before the armor-stripping sword could touch it, it immediately disappeared. This time my attack missed. This made me feel that the Spirit Lock Tower was very strange. This was only the first floor, and we already encountered such trouble. I didn't know what was waiting for us on the higher floors. Since it didn't attack me, it meant that it didn't want to attack us. I didn't know how big this floor was. The two of us had been walking around for more than half an hour, and we hadn't encountered the same situation as before. However, the more it was like this, the more difficult it was for me to move forward. I had to be more careful with each step. I had a feeling that there weren't any stairs in the Spirit Lock Tower. After walking for so long, there was no reason for us to still be here. Just as I was feeling doubtful, there was a sound in the sky. I saw a light yellow dot floating not far from us. I was a little angry because I couldn't find the exit. I took out a burning sun talisman and threw it over. I wanted to see what it was. The scorching sun talisman flew toward the yellow dot and exploded. Following the light of the explosion, I was able to see the thing's face. That thing was extremely ugly. It had a scarlet face with two silver-white horns, and the yellow dots were where its eyes should be. It had a ferocious face full of sharp teeth, and it was grinning at us. Although it was only the size of an ordinary person, it had a pair of black wings on its back, and the wings were emitting black gas. I was startled and immediately thought of the Yiksha in Buddhism. The monster in front of him looked exactly the same as the heavenly Yiksha. This Yiksha was originally a kind of ugly ghost in the Buddhist scriptures. It was brave, violent, and could eat people. Some of them were later taught by the great Buddha and became the god of Dharma protectors, and were listed as one of the 8 divisions of Heavenly Dragon. At the same time as the Rakshasa, they were born from the soul of the Lord of Life, Buluo Yidya, or the Great Brahma. Together with the Rakshasa guardian deity, he was also the heavenly subjects of the heavenly king of Vaishagate. They lived on the ground or in the air. They were ferocious, swift, and intimidating. They used to be evil and were on the same level as the devil. Later on, because they focused on their cultivation, Shiva gave them the ability to control the sun's orbit. However, because they didn't want the sun to set, they were defeated. Later on, the world was divided into day and night. This was also one of the reasons why Shiva became the green neck. However, didn't the Yiksha become the guardian god of Buddhism? Why was it imprisoned in the spirit sealing tower? However, after thinking about it, the Yiksha in Buddhism that had become a god wasn't the one in front of me. Otherwise, the spirit sealing tower wouldn't have been able to imprison it. Tong Tong saw that I was dumbfounded. What's the reason? I told her what I was thinking. After listening to me, she was bewildered. Her face became more solemn. Although Tong Tong's power wasn't bad, it would be difficult for her to deal with this heavenly yiksha. Her anxiety wasn't without reason. Since we had encountered this thing here, we couldn't avoid a fierce battle. The scorching sun talisman hadn't hurt it, so it would be difficult to deal with it. However, it wasn't the time to think about that. Perhaps the previous attack had enraged it. That heavenly yiksha had overtaken us. It was so fast that I couldn't react. Fortunately, Tong Tong was one step ahead of me. A black chain with lightning bolts lashed at heavenly yiksha's face. However, heavenly yiksha didn't slow down. It didn't dodge and just let Tong Tong's chain hit its body. There was a flash of fire. Heavenly yiksha's body paused for a moment, but it wasn't hurt at all. Right after that, it stretched out its hand to grab Tong Tong. Tong Tong immediately took out her chain and used it to block it. However, the originally powerful and extremely tough chains were broken by the heavenly yiksha's grasp. Just as its hand was about to reach Tong Tong, the heavenly yiksha's hand reached out. Seeing that, I cursed under my breath. This heavenly yiksha was a monster that could devour ghosts. Although Tong Tong was born as a Yin fetus, she was still a Yin soul. This heavenly yiksha had an innate ability to suppress her. If the heavenly yiksha grabbed Tong Tong, she would be devoured. With that thought, I circulated the Tao energy in my heavenly veins to my hands and thrust my sword at heavenly yiksha's hand. This time, the heavenly yiksha reacted. It changed the path of its hand and didn't go after Tong Tong. Instead, it retreated to dodge my sword. I immediately asked Tong Tong to hide behind me, asking her not to attack. When Tong Tong saw me, she pouted her lips. She wanted to say something, but I interrupted her. At this moment, heavenly yiksha was flying toward us. Its sharp claws were exposed, and the cold light from them sent chills down my spine. I didn't dare to be careless. I stepped out of the 9-star Heavenly Dipper and raised my dismantling armor sword. This time, heavenly yiksha didn't dodge. It used both hands to catch the dismantling armor sword. I was tense. I didn't expect that heavenly yiksha would be so strong. If it was an ordinary ghost, it would have been killed by my sword. Yet, this heavenly yiksha was able to withstand my attack. Even so, I could see the strain on its face. At this moment, the dismantling armor sword couldn't sink, and heavenly yiksha couldn't raise an inch. The two sides were in a deadlock. At this moment, I heard a clap of thunder. A chain made of black light appeared in front of me and lashed at heavenly yiksha. It turned out that Tong Tong had seized the opportunity to attack while the heavenly yiksha was focused on me. However, this attack still couldn't hurt it in the slightest. Instead, it drew out its anger. Black energy surged from its body, and the wings on its back expanded. The sharp barbs on its wings aimed at me. How could I let it have its way? I hurriedly pulled out the dismantling armor sword and retreated. Unexpectedly, I couldn't move it no matter how hard I tried. The dismantling armor sword was firmly grasped in its hand. Heavenly yiksha's face revealed a ferocious smile. His eyes were cold, as though he was looking at a corpse. At this moment, the barbs were almost in front of me. I didn't have time to think. I released the dismantling armor sword and jumped to the side. As soon as I jumped, the huge wings closed like an iron door. Seeing that, I was shocked. If I had been a second later, I would have become a dead soul. That heavenly yiksha didn't manage to capture me, and his anger increased. He threw away the dismantling armor sword and moved his hands behind his back. I didn't know what he was doing. In an instant, he raised his head and roared. Black liquid flowed out from the corner of his mouth. As the liquid flowed out, his pupils enlarged as though they were about to split open. Then there was a ripping sound. It seemed that his body had been torn open. His hands slowly moved forward as though he was holding something. When his hands returned to their original position, I could see that he was holding a black bone sword. It looked like his spine. As he flapped his wings, his body swayed in the air. It seemed that pulling out the bone sword had consumed a lot of his strength. Seeing that, I was stunned. I didn't think that he would have such a trump card. Perhaps he sensed my state, but he didn't give me any time to react. He flapped his wings and flew towards me. At the same time, he raised the bone sword in his hand. It was about to reach my face. At that moment, I didn't have any weapons in my hands. It was too late to pick up the dismantling armor sword. Thinking about that, I calmed myself down and closed my eyes. I summoned the original seal that had the words Natural Saint carved on it. When the 5'6" seal appeared, I pointed at the top of Heavenly Yiksha's head. The seal flew above his head. Then I shouted suppress. The Celestial Master seal immediately spun in the air. It emitted a golden light that completely surrounded Heavenly Yiksha's body. Heavenly Yiksha's body immediately froze under the seal. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't move an inch. Seeing that, I heaved a sigh of relief. This Heavenly Yiksha was really powerful to be able to force my Celestial Master seal out. However, I couldn't let my guard down. This Heavenly Yiksha might have other tricks up his sleeves. I immediately used the remaining Tao energy in my veins of the heavens and sent all of it to the seal. With that, the seal spun even faster. Heavenly Yiksha seemed to have sensed the danger and started to resist. He pushed the seal up a few inches. I didn't want to be outdone. I touched the jade bracelet on my chest with one hand and continuously absorbed the dragon energy inside. My other hand increased the amount of Tao energy I sent to push the seal down a few more inches. Chapter 758. When Heavenly Yiksha saw my reaction, he was pleased with himself. His face, which was covered in black liquid, revealed a strange smile. His ugly face now looked even more disgusting. At this moment, Tong Tong, who had been hiding behind me, ran over and helped me get up from the ground. She sobbed and asked me how you were doing. From the expression on her face, it could be seen that she seemed to feel very guilty for her rash actions earlier. I shook my heavy head and forced a smile to show her that I was all right. To prevent Tong Tong from worrying and to prevent Heavenly Yiksha from attacking us again, I had to use all of my strength to prop myself up. At this moment, Heavenly Yiksha still had its ugly face on. It was just that it was surprised that I was still able to stand up. However, he seemed to recognize that I was on the verge of collapsing. He wasn't in a hurry to deal with me. Instead, he turned to look at Tong Tong. Its piercing gaze caused Tong Tong's body to shrink. Her natural restraint was fully displayed at this moment. Tong Tong's previous attack didn't work. It was enough to show that there wasn't only a difference in power between them, but also an innate fear of her. Now, that Heavenly Yiksha had targeted Tong Tong, it must have noticed that she was an Een fetus. The natural Een fetus was a rare treasure, and it was a rare tonic for ghosts. I hadn't encountered such a situation before because Tong Tong was much stronger than those ghosts. Even if she wanted to, she couldn't do anything. But now, the situation was different. Although Heavenly Yiksha was also a ghost, it lived by devouring ghosts. If it had its way, its power would increase greatly. At that time, the spirit sealing tower wouldn't be able to hold it anymore. With that thought, I pulled Tong Tong behind me and asked her to return to the jade bracelet. Although Tong Tong was innocent, she understood what I meant. She pulled my arm, tears welling up in her eyes. No, brother. I promised Sister Hua Hua that I would protect you. Then, she walked away. I hurried to pull her back. I rubbed her head and whispered, don't worry. I'll be all right. For Big Sister Hua Hua, Big Brother will kill this monster. After listening to me, she hesitated for a while. Then, she nodded and asked me to be careful. She turned and flew back to the jade bracelet. After she left, I felt at ease. If I leave Tong Tong here, not only will he not be of any help, he will also face greater danger. I won't be able to focus my attention on dealing with this Yiksha. When Heavenly Yiksha, who was not far away, saw Tong Tong vanish in an instant, his eyes glazed over. Clearly, he could not react in time. In the blink of an eye, his gaze locked onto the jade bracelet on my chest. It wore an evil smile. Holding the bone sword in its hand, it swayed as it walked toward me. Looking at its appearance, It must have used up a lot of energy under the control of the seal. However, it was still much better than my current state. Seeing that it was about to reach me, I backed away while trying to think of a solution. At this moment, I was the only one left facing off against Heaven Yiksha. I didn't expect such a situation. If Fatty was here, he might be able to use the formation to help me resist for a while. Thinking about this, I suddenly realized that I had a helper with me. I immediately called the serpent spirit. In the blink of an eye, the serpent spirit appeared in front of me. When he saw that I was in such a sorry state, he was surprised and asked, "What happened to you? Who bullied you? Tell your Lord Long, and I'll help you beat him up." Hearing his tone, I didn't pay much attention to it and pointed at the heavenly Yaksha that was getting closer. The serpent spirit looked in the direction that I was pointing at. When he saw the heavenly Yaksha, he shuddered and shouted, "What the hell is that thing? It looks so scary." I told him about the situation here and asked if he could kill this heavenly Yaksha. When the serpent spirit heard what I said, he pointed at the heavenly Yaksha before pointing at himself. His face was filled with shock. "It can't be. You want me to bite that ugly thing? I can't bring myself to do it." Seeing that the heavenly Yaksha was getting closer to us, I didn't have time to talk nonsense with him and said sternly, "Could it be that you've eaten too many ugly things from that old witch? If you can't handle it, help me hold him back. I need to recover my strength." After saying that, I kicked him away and sat down cross-legged. I closed my eyes and held the jade bracelet tightly with both of my hands to absorb the dragon aura from it. Due to the celestial master seal being struck by the black light, the veins of the heaven were slightly damaged. Currently, the recovery was much slower than before. Moreover, I was worried that the serpent spirit would fight seriously, so I couldn't focus on recovering my injuries. When a dragon roar resounded in the surroundings, it was most likely that the serpent spirit had transformed into his original form. This meant that he was fighting against the heavenly Yiksha. Only then did I calm down and focus all my attention on recovering the veins of the heaven. As a large amount of dragon aura from the jade bracelet entered my body, the veins of the heaven that were slightly damaged started to recover after being stimulated by the pure aura. However, the recovery speed was much slower than I had expected. I didn't know how much time had passed, but the veins of the heaven were only 70 to 80% healed. If it wasn't for the serpent spirit's incessant urging, the veins of the heaven might have completely recovered. However, this 70 to 80% was enough for me to use the Xian Yuan sword. At this moment, I opened my eyes and saw the serpent spirit fighting against the heavenly Yiksha. Both of them were wounded, and they seemed to be evenly matched. I had thought that the serpent spirit wouldn't be able to completely suppress the wounded heavenly Yiksha, but it would be able to win at least 1 or 2 points. I hadn't expected this. I seized the chance to take the Xian Yuan sword out of my mouth and urged the Tao energy in the veins of the heaven to wrap the sword. Then, I ordered the serpent spirit to retreat. The heavenly Yiksha seemed to realize that the situation wasn't good. He immediately wanted to entangle the serpent spirit so that I wouldn't be able to attack him. However, he didn't expect that the serpent spirit would transform into his human form and jump behind me. At the same time, the Xian Yuan sword was ready to attack. It carried a golden light and aimed at the heavenly Yiksha's face. The heavenly Yiksha saw that he couldn't dodge, so he immediately used his wings to wrap his body. Unexpectedly, he couldn't resist the sword and fell from the sky. As soon as he landed, the heavenly Yiksha's body turned into a mass of black mist that gradually dissipated in the air. I stood on the spot and didn't move forward. I looked around vigilantly in case the heavenly Yiksha came back to life. After confirming that there was no movement around, I heaved a sigh of relief and slumped on the ground. The serpent spirit sat next to me and exclaimed, "It was so dangerous. If I had been a second slower, I would have been captured and taken hostage." Then he asked, "Why didn't you ask Tong Tong to deal with it? She's so powerful, so it would have been easy for her to deal with this thing. I didn't know what was going on, but you kicked me away. I almost lost my life because of you." I just smiled when I heard his complaints. I didn't mention what had happened earlier. If he knew that Tong Tong wasn't his match, he wouldn't be so obedient in the future. That was why I needed Tong Tong to suppress him at all times. After the previous battle, especially after using the Xian Yuan sword, I didn't have any Tao energy left in my body. I didn't know if there were other things on the first floor, but the most important thing now was to adjust my condition and recover my strength. Thinking about this, I closed my eyes and began to meditate. I absorbed the dragon energy from the jade bracelet to recover. The serpent spirit felt bored and returned to my back after sitting next to me for a few minutes. The dragon energy circulated in my body for more than 10 cycles before the damaged part of the meridian of the heaven was repaired. This was far from enough, as the Tao energy in my body was still in an empty state. However, after the meridian of the heaven was repaired, it would be much faster to replenish my Tao energy. When I woke up, I found Tong Tong sitting in front of me. She was looking at me blankly with a worried expression on her face. When she saw that I had woken up, she immediately said, "Brother, you're finally awake." I sensed that the monster's aura was no longer outside. It seems that you've defeated it. However, I realized that you were adjusting your breathing, so I didn't want to disturb you. How do you feel now? Are you feeling better? I rubbed her head and told her that my body had recovered. I told her not to worry. She nodded and asked about my next plan. After hearing what she said, I didn't rush to respond. Instead, I stood up and stretched my muscles. After realizing that the soreness in my body had disappeared, I said, "Let's first look for a place to go to the second floor." After searching for a long time on the first floor, we found a metal door in a very inconspicuous place. The metal door looked very simple and unadorned. There was no trace of rust on it, but it was very sturdy. I tried everything I could, but I couldn't move it in the slightest. Seeing that the exit was right there, but I couldn't do anything about it, the joy in my heart disappeared. I sat in front of the door and carefully examined it. Since we were currently in the Spirit Lock Tower, only a Buddhist magic tool or incantation could open the door. Although I didn't know about Buddhist incantations, I did have a magic tool on me. Thinking about this, I took out the reclining Buddha beads from my Xiang Lu pouch and walked towards the metal door. As expected, the moment the beads got close to the metal door, they immediately reacted. The beads that were emitting bursts of golden light continuously rotated in the air. Then, I knocked on the metal door 3 times. After doing this, the beads returned to their original state and returned to my hand. At the same time, the metal door in front of me slowly opened with a creak, and bursts of Buddhist light shot out from inside. Chapter 759. The space on this floor was much smaller than the previous one. Although the surroundings were dark, it didn't affect my vision. Having learned my lesson, I didn't dare to linger here. I had to seize the time to find a place to go upstairs. Tong Tong followed closely behind me and didn't dare to leave me for even half a step. It seemed the previous encounter had scared her a lot. Out of reflex, I looked for the exit while asking Tong Tong, "Is there anything strange here?" She looked a little nervous, and she couldn't say anything. Seeing her like this, I didn't pay much attention to her. Based on what happened earlier, this Spirit Lock Pagoda was a Buddhist pagoda, and there were many ghosts and monsters sealed inside. This pagoda must have a suppressive effect on such things, which was part of the reason why Tong Tong's strength was greatly reduced earlier. From this, it seemed that Tong Tong couldn't play a big role in the spirit sealing tower. However, without her help, it would be a lot more difficult for me. With that thought, I asked Tong Tong to return to the jade bracelet. Perhaps she understood what I meant from my words. Her small face turned red. She lowered her head and didn't speak or move. After a long time, she sobbed and said, "Brother, I'm sorry. I'm useless." Seeing her like that, my heart tightened. I rubbed her head and comforted her. "Tong Tong, I didn't mean that. You got hurt, and you haven't recovered yet. I want you to stay in the jade bracelet to recover. That way, you can help me. Am I right?" Then, I recognized that Tong Tong was different from before. Although she was still innocent, she had the ability to think like a normal person. In the future, I would have to think carefully before talking to her. After listening to me, Tong Tong nodded skeptically. Then, She turned and disappeared. As soon as she left, I continued to look around. He had only taken a few steps when he suddenly heard a noise under his feet. He felt the ground beneath him sink in, as if a piece of the floor had loosened. This sudden noise startled me. I became vigilant and slowly lowered my body to check the situation under my feet. Sure enough, the tip of my right foot had a 5-inch square brick that had sunk a few centimeters. After the previous lesson, I didn't dare to act rashly. I was afraid that if I moved my foot away from the brick, something would happen to it. But it was not feasible for him to keep standing here. After thinking for a while, he took out the armor-removing sword from Xiang Lu's bag and a few scorching yang talismans, holding them tightly in his hands. He decided to throw out the talismans as soon as he lifted his feet to catch him off guard. Thinking of this, he steadied his mind and instantly jumped back. At the same time, he threw a few fierce sun talismans in his hand at the previous position. Suddenly, a fiery light appeared in the air, brightening up the originally dim space. Under the light of the flame, I stared at the blue brick I had just seen. However, I didn't see anything strange. Even when the fierce sun talisman burned out and the fire disappeared, the place was still the same as before. All of this was somewhat unexpected to me. I gripped the armor-dispelling sword tightly and slowly walked forward, wanting to see what was going on. Unexpectedly, the green brick suddenly bounced up as if it had been hit by some kind of power. Following the sound of the brick falling to the ground, a black lotus slowly rose from the spot that was originally a few inches wide. It looked very strange. In the past, the lotus I had seen only had one lotus on each stem. However, the one in front of me was different. Although it didn't have a stem, it looked like two lotus flowers intertwining with each other. This scene made me think of the twin lotus flower. This thing wasn't common. During the natural growth process, only one twin lotus flower could grow out of thousands of lotus flowers. The twin lotus flower was a 1,000-petal lotus of the lotus family. It was a precious flower that gathered the essence of the lotus. In ancient times, people considered the twin lotus flower as an auspicious and joyous omen. It was the embodiment of kindness and beauty. It was the symbol of love. It symbolized the love between a husband and wife, happiness and happiness. It also symbolized the lingering love between a man and a woman, as well as the deep bond between brothers. However, the twin lotus flower in front of me was emitting thick black smoke. I couldn't associate it with words like auspicious or joyous. The more I looked at it, the more strange and terrifying I felt. Thinking of this, I could only stand still and stare at the black Bingdi lotus. However, even after observing it for a long time, the twin lotus flower was still floating in the air. It didn't move at all. I paused and prepared to attack the twin lotus flower with the dismantling armor sword. However, as soon as I arrived in front of it, the black smoke around the twin lotus flower became thicker. My heart tightened, and I prepared to fight. I reached one of my hands into my Shangli pouch, ready to take out the talismans at any time. At this moment, the air seemed to slow down. It seemed they were also observing the twin lotus flower's strange movements. According to my guess, the ghosts imprisoned in the Spirit Lock Tower have different levels of strength. Clearly, the higher the level, the stronger these things are. I was indignant when I remembered that I had suffered a great loss on the first floor. If something even more tyrannical appeared now, I was afraid I wouldn't have a good time either. With that thought in mind, I poured my Tao energy into the dismantling armor sword and slashed at the twin lotus flower. When the dismantling armor sword collided with the twin lotus flower, I heard a clanging sound as if I had hit some kind of metal. However, in the blink of an eye, the dismantling armor sword bounced back, and my hand started to tremble. Seeing this, I couldn't help but exclaim in my heart, "How tough!" The twin lotus flower didn't seem to be damaged after the previous attack. Instead, it became even more lustrous. Every inch of its petals was shimmering with a black light, making it look exquisite. It seemed this item wasn't an ordinary item. Since my attack hadn't succeeded, I didn't attack anymore. I circled around the twin lotus flower a few times. It wasn't strange for lotuses to appear in the spirit ceiling tower. Lotuses and Buddhism had an inextricable relationship. Buddhism's Surangama Sutra said, when the revered one's flesh glowed with the light of 100 treasures. Amidst the light came a 1,000-leaf lotus, and the Buddha sat on the lotus. Then there was the Vimla Sutra that said, be like a lotus flower that doesn't care about worldly affairs. Always be good in solitude. The important explanations of the sutras said, all the Buddhas of the 10 directions were born in the muddy mud. Their 3 bodies achieved enlightenment, and they all sat on the lotus platform. The Buddha had emerged from the mud, achieved enlightenment, and attained great freedom. Although he had transcended the mortal world, he didn't deviate from worldly laws. The lotus and Buddhism's concept of being detached from worldly affairs had a perfect fit. This was enough to show the importance of the lotus in Buddhism. Could it be that the appearance of the black lotus here was related to a certain Buddhist bodhisattva? I couldn't help but take a deep breath. If that was the case, I wouldn't be able to leave the 2nd floor. However, after thinking about it for a while, I recalled that the lotus pedestals I'd seen in Buddhism were all gilded in gold. They were also plain and unadorned. I'd never seen a pedestal with a black light. While I was absent-minded, I heard a strange laughter. I turned around and saw that the palm-sized twin lotus flower had grown to several feet. Moreover, there was a half-man, half-woman monster lying on the pedestal. Half of the monster's body was luxuriously dressed, which made it look like an enchanting woman. The other half of the monster had red hair and green eyes. It looked like an ugly man. At this moment, we were looking at each other. From its eyes, I could feel an ethereal feeling. Its body was exuding a thick black gas. That gas was as hot as flames, and I could feel the waves of heat coming from it. Along with the waves of heat came an indescribable smell that made me dizzy. Standing next to it was really torturous. I immediately jumped a few meters away. Only then did I feel better. As the saying goes, know yourself and know your enemy, and you'll never be defeated. I couldn't recognize this half-man, half-woman monster, so I didn't want to attack it. I wanted to communicate with it. I wanted to know its identity first. Unexpectedly, although this monster looked strange, it didn't have a complete mind. After asking it for a while, I learned that it called itself the Rakshasa Bodhisattva. I had never heard of this Rakshasa Bodhisattva, but I knew about the Rakshasa ghost. The Rakshasa ghost was the name of the most evil ghost in hell. It was also known as the Rakshasa, and Arakshasa. It could be translated as the dreadful ghost, the speedy ghost, and the protector. It was the devil in Indian mythology. According to legend, it was the name of the indigenous people in India. After the Aryans conquered India, it became a synonym for evil people, which eventually became the general name of evil ghosts. The male Rakshasa had a black body, red hair, and green eyes. The female Rakshasa was a beautiful woman with charming power. She ate human flesh and blood. I guess this monster was the Rakshasa ghost. However, I didn't know why 2 Rakshasas shared the same body. What made me feel strange was that the Rakshasa ghost was the most evil ghost in hell. It should be in the netherworld. Why would it appear in the spirit ceiling tower? With my previous experience, I decided to ask about this matter. Indeed, the half-man, half-woman Rakshasa told me the truth. According to it, it didn't look like this before, but a tyrannical ghost had suddenly appeared in the 9 underworlds many years ago. As soon as that ghost arrived in the netherworld, it started to devour other ghosts to strengthen itself. At the same time, the order of the netherworld was in chaos. Many ghosts fled in all directions to avoid being devoured. Perhaps the tyrannical Een spirit hated those weak souls and finally targeted Rakshasa and the like. Although the Rakshasa was the most evil ghost in the netherworld, they were still scared when they saw this ghost. They all ran away to avoid it. However, while running away, the Rakshasa in front of me accidentally bumped into another female Rakshasa. Unexpectedly, both Rakshasas fell into the Een River. Coincidentally, there was a twin black lotus growing on the Een River, and the 2 Rakshasas landed on the twin black lotus. When they wanted to run away, they found that their bodies had fused with each other. Chapter 760. Later on, the twin Rakshasa met a monk called Bhikkhu. That monk's Buddhist power was profound, and the twin Rakshasa wasn't his match. It thought that would return to the netherworld or vanish on the spot. Unexpectedly, the monk said that he had imprisoned it in the spirit sealing tower of the reclining Buddha temple for the sake of salvation. Before he left, he said that he would wait for a predestined person to enlighten it. Then it would be able to cultivate the great path. After listening to the story, I couldn't help but sigh. When it mentioned the tyrannical spirit, the first thing I thought of was a wisp of Chiyo's soul. The spirit the twin Rakshasa mentioned had escaped from the netherworld, which was similar to the sacrificial evil spirit. However, the timing didn't match. I remember that the first time I saw the sacrificial evil spirit, it was in the deep well under the orchard in Shenzhen. Later on, I learned that the cave under the orchard was the ancestral land of Mount Wen. The sacrificial evil spirit was summoned by Prime Minister Wen to save the Southern Song dynasty. However, the twin Rakshasa mentioned that it was imprisoned there by a monk called Bhikkhu. As far as I knew, that Bhikkhu was a monk who came to China during the Tang dynasty to seek the Dharma. It seemed that the tyrannical spirit was someone else. Speaking of this Bhikkhu, my interest was piqued. According to the legends, this monk from the Silla royal family was the incarnation of Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva was named after the fact that he was patient and motionless like the earth. He was calm and composed like a hidden treasure. In Buddhism, Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva was a bodhisattva with a profound power of vows. According to the Buddhist scriptures, Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva had saved his mother, who was suffering in hell several times in his previous life. Since the beginning of the Great Tribulation, he had made a vow to save all living beings who had sinned, especially those in hell. That was why this bodhisattva's virtues of great filial piety and great vows were widely spread in Buddhism. Because of this, people called him Great Vows Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva, and he became one of the 4 great bodhisattvas of Han Buddhism. According to the legends, when Tathagata lived on Mount Lingjio, Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva traveled to various countries to enlighten all living beings. Eventually, he arrived at Mount Pifulao and went to Elder Jodi's house. His elder's family was robbed of his essence energy by a ghost. His family of 500 people died of suffocation and lost consciousness. 10 days passed. When Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva saw this, he thought, "It's really bitter, it's really painful. There are such unspeakable things in the world. Today, I sympathize with all living beings and offer my salvation." After he said this, he flew towards the spirit vulture mountain and said to the white Buddha, "Revered one of the world, I've seen more than 500 people in Elder Chiao Ti's family. The evil ghost has taken their spiritual essence, and they've been suffocating on the ground for several days. Seeing that the matter has come to an end, I feel pity for the people and love them. My only hope is that the revered one of the world will allow me to devise this method of relief. Command all evil spirits to submit to men, command all Taoists to do as they please, and command all elders to return to their former glory." Then the Tathagata, from the top of the mountain, radiates light everywhere, illuminating the earth to hide. The people at the meeting all said to each other, "Today, the Tathagata shines brightly and hides his body. This bodhisattva will definitely achieve the great Dharma and enlighten all living beings." At that time, Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva, the white Buddha, said, "Today I have a divine incantation that can remove the evil heart, so that the evil spirits can be controlled again. I recite that the past is boundless and boundless. There was a Buddha in the distant past, and my name is Burning Light King. After the destruction of the Buddha, in the image Dharma, I lived in the land of mortals." Thus, the Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva, who had the extraordinary virtue of swearing not to become a Buddha until hell is controlled, was born. I thought about the story I'd read in the past. My eyes gazed at the twin Rakshasa. Our eyes met, and I didn't look away. It seemed the previous story wasn't fabricated. It had been waiting here for more than 1,000 years. Although it was the number one evil spirit in the 9 serenities, it wasn't hard to tell from its tone that it still yearned to cultivate the great path. It seemed the twin Rakshasa didn't have anything to do with my current goal. This floor shouldn't be dangerous. I cupped my hands at the twin Rakshasa and was about to leave. I also wanted to ask for the direction to the 3rd floor. However, as soon as I said that I wanted to leave, the twin Rakshasa's face darkened. I could see a trace of evil in its eyes. I didn't understand what I had done to offend it. How did it end up like this? Its eyes made me flustered. Out of caution, I took a few steps back. At this moment, the twin Rakshasa laughed evilly. I've been waiting here for more than 1,000 years, but I haven't seen the one who can enlighten me. Today, I finally saw a living person come here. How could I let you go so easily? You'd better stay here and wait with me. Then, it didn't give me a chance to talk and attacked me. A black mist quickly shrouded me. No matter where I tried to run, I couldn't escape. I pulled myself together and took out a few burning sun talismans from my Shangliu pouch. I threw them all into the black mist. Unexpectedly, the scene of the previous fire did not appear at all. Instead, there was only a poochie sound. The moment the fierce sun talisman took effect, it was completely swallowed by the black fog. I had a preliminary understanding of the twin Rakshasa's power. However, I was startled after this battle. I didn't expect that it could trap me with just one attack. If it wanted to risk its life to fight with me, I wouldn't have a chance of winning. Thinking about that, I couldn't help but feel disappointed. The twin Rakshasa didn't attack me again. When it saw that my attack didn't work, it slumped down on the lotus pedestal. Its eyes were filled with mockery. When I saw that, I realized that the twin Rakshasa had played me like a monkey. Instantly, the disappointment in my heart disappeared and was replaced with anger. I channeled the chi in the veins of the heavens into the dismantling armor sword and prepared to cut open the black mist surrounding me. In a few seconds, the dismantling armor sword was filled with chi. I took a deep breath and raised it above my head. Then, I chose a spot and fiercely swung the dismantling armor sword. The dismantling armor sword shone with a golden light. When it touched the black mist, the sword trembled slightly. However, the black mist didn't change at all. Seeing that I was in a predicament, I couldn't increase the power of the dismantling armor sword. I couldn't free myself either. Thus, I shouted at the dismantling armor sword, "Senior, help me." This sentence was naturally meant for the person hiding in the dismantling armor sword to hear. I knew that the twin Rakshasa's power was strong and that I wasn't a match for them. Thus, I took a gamble and asked the person in the sword to help me. As I expected, once I said that, the old voice from the dismantling armor sword sounded out. He signaled for me to relax and only channel chi into the dismantling armor sword. Then, he handed the dismantling armor sword over to him. When I heard what he said, I didn't hesitate in the slightest and did as he said. I infused all of the chi in my body into the dismantling armor sword. Not long after, the dismantling armor sword shook violently and left my hand. It hummed softly and floated in the air. I stared at the changes in the dismantling armor sword as I took a few steps back. At that moment, besides the golden light that I had channeled into the dismantling armor sword, there was an azure flame wrapped around the sword. It looked extremely dazzling. I didn't know if it was the original power of the dismantling armor sword or if it was the doing of the senior. With the appearance of the azure flame, the stalemate situation gradually changed. The azure flame seemed to have a strong restraining effect on the black mist. As the dismantling armor sword moved forward, the black mist was gradually dispersed. There seemed to be a burning smell in the air, which was rather pungent. Seeing this, I was elated. It seemed that the black mist would be destroyed by the dismantling armor sword soon. Sure enough, in just a few dozen seconds, the surrounding black fog could not hold on any longer and let out a buzzing sound. Then, the blue flames on the remodeling sword burst forth, burning a huge hole in the black fog in front of them. After that, the black fog exploded like a balloon that had been pierced by a needle, dissipating into the air. After that, the dismantling armor sword's light rays disappeared and it fell to the ground, giving off a crisp sound. When the twin Rakshasa, who was originally sitting diagonally, saw this, he revealed a surprised expression. It was obvious that he didn't think that I would be able to break through the black mist. After the previous attack, I knew that I wasn't his opponent. Taking advantage of the opportunity, when the armor-stripping sword suppressed him, I cupped my hands towards him and said, "I have important matters to attend to in the Spirit Lock Tower. Please let me pass and don't obstruct me." Unexpectedly, the twin Rakshasa became angry after hearing that. He waved his hand and stood up. He pointed at me and shouted, "You don't know what's good for you. I have given you a chance to comprehend Buddhism, but you are so impatient. You really can't be taught. Fine, I will start a massacre today and send you to the 9 hells to suffer the pain of reincarnation." After hearing that, my heart tightened. I instinctively retreated to the dismantling armor sword and picked it up. Who knew that the dismantling armor sword would be extremely hot? From within the dismantling armor sword, the old voice sounded again. "Little friend, I just activated the dismantling armor sword's potential. I'm afraid that I won't be able to help you for a while. You'll have to rely on yourself to deal with what happens next." Since I couldn't use the dismantling armor sword, I could only use the Xian Yuan sword. However, I hadn't completely understood the Xian Yuan sword's usage. Moreover, the Dao Qi in my body wasn't enough for me to use it a few more times. At that moment, the twin Rakshasa was already flying towards me. They were only a few meters away from me. I didn't have much time to think and threw the dismantling armor sword back into the Xianglu pouch. At the same time, I opened my mouth and took out the Xian Yuan sword. The twin Rakshasa's momentum was extremely ferocious. However, just as they were about to pounce on me, they suddenly stopped and stared at the Xian Yuan sword in my hand. Their eyes shone brightly, and the corners of their lips unconsciously curled into a smile. "This is a treasure, but it's a waste in your hands. Fine, after I kill you, I'll refine it into my life's equipment." The twin Rakshasa really didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. The Xian Yuan sword was one of the 10 great divine instruments from the ancient times. It was born with an enormous amount of righteous energy. Even if it was snatched away by them, they wouldn't be able to enjoy it. When the twin Rakshasa saw that I didn't react, they didn't say anything else. They grinned and continued to charge towards me. At that moment, there was only a weak strand of Dao Qi left in my heaven veins. I wasn't even sure if I could activate the Xian Yuan sword. Fighting them head-on would be suicide. With that thought in mind, I rapidly retreated. As I dealt with them, I thought of a way to deal with them. The twin Rakshasas were extremely fast. Just dodging their attacks had consumed all of my stamina. Around 10 minutes later, I felt that my stamina couldn't hold on anymore. After dodging one more time, I panted heavily. My legs gave way, and I fell to the ground. Chapter 761. In a moment of desperation, I shouted, "Wait!" The twin Rakshasa already had some mental issues, and with the addition of 1,000 years of loneliness, he probably didn't want to kill me so quickly. After hearing my shout, he instantly stopped and stood in front of me. He asked me with interest, "What's the matter?" As I panted, my thoughts flashed, and I gradually came up with an idea. After my breathing stabilized, I took the opportunity to sit up. I grabbed the jade bracelet in front of my chest with one hand and continuously absorbed the dragon chi in it to recover my Dao Qi. At the same time, I said to him, "Why don't we make a deal?" After hearing what I said, he became even more confused. It was obvious that he didn't understand what I was talking about. The more he acted like this, the more time he could buy for me. Seeing this, I remained calm and explained to him, "What I mean is very simple. Aren't you waiting for the person to convert you? Let me go and let me finish my business. Then I'll help you bring that person here. What do you think?" After hearing what I said, the twin Rakshasa didn't reply. He was stunned on the spot for a few seconds. From the subtle movements of his hands, he seemed to be considering my words. After half a minute, his eyebrows relaxed. It was obvious that he had an idea. During this period of time, the Dao Qi in my body was enough for me to use the Xian Yuan sword once. If he understood what I meant and wanted to attack me, I would have the ability to protect myself. Unexpectedly, he nodded at me and said, "This method seems feasible, but can you really bring him here?" After hearing that, I was overjoyed and stood up. Of course, as long as you tell me what that person looks like, I'll definitely be able to bring him here. Of course, this was just a delaying tactic. After I finished my business, I definitely wouldn't be willing to return to the Spirit Lock Tower. Although my strength had recovered, I still had no chance of winning against him. If I delayed like this, he might really let me go. Unexpectedly, after hearing what I said, the twin Rakshasa revealed a troubled expression. He smacked his lips and told me that he didn't know what that person's name was or what he looked like. I didn't know what to say. I was dumbfounded for a long time. When the twin Rakshasa saw my troubled expression, they seemed to sense that something was wrong. "Can you do it?" This made me feel awkward. Finding a person in this boundless world was like finding a needle in a haystack. Moreover, I didn't even know what that person looked like. However, since it was just a show, I couldn't reveal any flaws. Thinking to this point, I hurriedly replied, indicating that there was no problem. When the twin Rakshasa saw that I had expressed my opinion, their worried faces changed. They waved their hands at me, signaling that I could leave now. I couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief and slowly backed away. When I couldn't see his face anymore, I turned around and started to run. I didn't dare to stay here any longer. If the twin Rakshasa were to react, they would catch up to me in a matter of seconds. However, even though I had walked around the entire floor, I couldn't find the iron door that I'd seen on the first floor. This surprised me a little. Could it be that there was no such door on this floor, and that I had to use some other method to get up? Right now, every second was extremely precious to me. I definitely couldn't waste too much time here. However, I had no clue how to find the exit. Perhaps the twin Rakshasa knew where to go, but I didn't have the courage to turn around and ask them. I had stayed here for a long time. It seemed that I wouldn't be able to escape this time. I had to brace myself and go back the way I had come. At this moment, the twin Rakshasa was lying on the bottom of the black flower pedestal. When they saw me, they looked surprised. "What happened?" I told them my question and asked, "Do you know the way out?" Unexpectedly, the twin Rakshasa also wore a puzzled face. I don't know. While talking to them, my heart was stuck in my throat. I was afraid that they would realize what I had just told them. Fortunately, they didn't have a high intellect, so they didn't pursue the matter. However, when I didn't get an answer, they waved their hands and asked me to leave. They didn't want to disturb their rest. I heaved a sigh of relief. Now, I could safely find the exit. I remembered that on the first floor, the mala beads had a reaction when they approached the iron door. It was possible that the same thing would happen on the second floor. I took out the mala bead from the Shangliu bag and held them in my hand. My eyes gazed at the mala beads as I walked around. When I had walked more than half of the floor, the mala beads in my hand finally reacted. They flashed with a faint golden light. I was thrilled. I stopped and walked in the direction I had predicted. As I got closer, the golden light around the mala beads became more dazzling. Finally, I found the location of the exit on a stone wall. This exit didn't look like the iron door from before. It was embedded in the stone wall, and I couldn't see anything strange from a distance. I used my hand to knock on the stone wall, but there was no sound. I slowly brought the mala beads closer. The stones on the stone wall slowly loosened. Then they all fell. At the same time, the place where the stones fell emitted waves of golden light. I didn't dare to look at the sudden golden light with my naked eyes. I hurried to cover my eyes. After I calmed down, I opened them again. However, the scene in front of me scared me. The twin Rakshasa was standing in front of me. Their eyes were fixed on the mala beads in my hand. Their bodies seemed to be frozen, and they didn't move for a long time. The twin Rakshasas were evil to begin with, and their current appearance was even more bizarre. Seeing this, I didn't dare to act rashly. I didn't know how much time had passed, but the twin Rakshasa finally moved. They stretched out their right hand and slowly reached for the mala beads in my hand. However, as soon as they touched it, their hand shrank. It seemed they were afraid of the mala beads. However, The strange thing was that the twin Rakshas's eyes were filled with joy. As soon as they retracted their hand, they reached out again to touch the mala beads. I hesitated and asked, "Do you recognize these mala beads?" When the twin Rakshasa heard my voice, they stopped moving and turned to look at me. The joy in their eyes became stronger. They stretched out their hands and reached for me. This time my hair stood on end. I hurriedly jumped back and subconsciously raised the Xianyuan sword in my hand. I didn't expect that the twin Rakshasa would become very polite. They put their palms together and bowed to me. In a low, muffled voice, they said, "I didn't know Grandmaster's identity. Please forgive me for offending you." I was bewildered. Grandmaster? Offending me? What do they mean? I didn't know why, but they seemed to respect me. After thinking for a while, I opened my mouth and asked, "What's the matter?" Unexpectedly, the twin Rakshasa became excited. After talking for a long time, they finally told me that I was the fated person they had been waiting for. I was dumbstruck. I hadn't expected such an outcome. The twin Rakshasa saw that I didn't move for a long time, and their faces turned pale. They knelt down and said in a low voice, "Grandmaster, do you still blame me for what happened? I will apologize to you." Then they kowtowed to me. This change in attitude was too fast, but at least I understood one thing. They definitely wouldn't attack me again. Thus, I calmed down and shook my heavy head. I told the twin Rakshasa to stand up and repeat what they had said earlier. I finally understood what it meant after it had said it one more time. According to them, the monk, who was Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva, had imprisoned them in the spirit-locked tower of the Crouching Buddha Temple. They had told them to wait for a person with prayer beads to appear. That person was the one who could enlighten them. After I understood what they meant, I became confused. The twin Rakshasa was sure that I was that person, but I knew that I was only here to open the second part of the death scripture and complete a task that Monk Miaojua had entrusted me with. It had nothing to do with the person who could enlighten them. I wanted to tell them the truth, but I was worried that they would attack me again after learning the truth. I hesitated and couldn't make up my mind. Seeing that I didn't move for a long time, the twin Rakshasa became obedient. They lowered their heads and waited quietly without urging me. Looking at their current appearance, I didn't think they were as despicable as before. Perhaps they were just like they said. They had been alone for too long and wanted to find a playmate. They didn't really want to kill me. After thinking for a long time, I asked them, "Isn't it a little rash to use the prayer beads to determine the identity of the fated person?" Who would have thought that after listening to me, it wouldn't be moved at all? Instead, it would try to persuade me. "Master, you might not know this, but that Bhikkhu monk defeated me with this string of prayer beads in your hand. After teaching me, he left. And now, you're here with the prayer beads in your hand. How can this be a coincidence?" His words did make some sense. However, I understood that although my identity was mysterious, I had never been related to Buddhism. I had obtained the prayer beads in Chiyo's tomb by chance. Moreover, I had come to the Crouching Buddha Temple because I had discovered the connection between the prayer beads and the Green Lantern Scroll. If I had obtained the prayer beads when I was born, the twin Rakshasa's words would have been understandable. However, the whole process was random, and I couldn't be sure. While thinking about this, I suddenly remembered that before I had obtained the prayer beads, a string of Sanskrit words had appeared on the wall. Although I had never studied Sanskrit, I understood the meaning of the words at that moment. It was a very strange thing. Moreover, the fact that the Green Lantern Scroll was related to the prayer beads made it even more unimaginable. Logically speaking, I had nothing to do with Buddhism, but I could understand Sanskrit. I didn't know if the prayer beads had anything to do with me, but I was sure that the Green Lantern Scroll was related to me. Moreover, according to the twin Rakshasa, the prayer beads belonged to Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. Monk Miaoju had asked me to put the prayer beads back on the Buddha statue on the top floor. This meant that the Buddha statue belonged to Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. Chapter 762. After thinking about this, I suppressed my astonishment and said to the twin Rakshasa, "I believe what you said, but I don't know how to enlighten you." Actually, I didn't need to agree to their request, as they wouldn't attack me anyway. However, after the previous interaction, The twin Rakshasa wasn't as vicious as they appeared to be. Although they weren't fully intelligent, their hearts weren't bad. Furthermore, the Buddhists always said that saving a life was better than building a 7-floor pagoda. It was a simple task, so why not? I didn't think that my question would cause them to be stumped. Their face was filled with astonishment, as they obviously didn't expect me to say that. They immediately raised their voice and asked me, "Does Grandmaster not know?" After hearing their words, I felt slightly awkward. I really didn't know how to enlighten them. I had never experienced such a thing before. Furthermore, I wasn't a Buddhist and didn't know any scriptures. How could I learn the method to enlighten them? I told the twin Rakshasa about the situation. After hearing it, their expression changed from astonishment to disappointment. Seeing this, I felt a little apologetic. The twin Rakshasa had waited in the spirit lock tower for 1,000 years just for me to enlighten them. However, they didn't expect their hopes to be dashed just like that. After their joy, they were greatly disappointed. It was hard for them to accept it. The twin Rakshasa hugged their heads and squatted on the ground for a long time. Seeing them like that made me feel uncomfortable, but I didn't know how to comfort them. After about 3 to 5 minutes, they slowly raised their heads and looked at me. Their eyes were no longer as excited as before and had been replaced with emptiness. Their throat moved, and after a long time, they squeezed out a sentence, "Is there really no other way?" I didn't reply to them and just stared at them for a long time. I really couldn't think of a way to help them, so I shook my head and sighed softly. Seeing me like that, the twin Rakshasa didn't appear to be depressed at all. Instead, they looked as though they had been relieved of a heavy burden. They slowly stood up and cupped their hands towards me. Since that's the case, I won't disturb Grandmaster any longer. It seems that I'm destined to be unable to leave the spirit lock tower. After saying that, he waved his hand and prepared to return to the base of the Black Lotus. For the twin Rakshasa to say something like that, they must have already lost all hope. Most people would not be able to maintain their rationality after such a great disappointment. He just felt a little sorry for it. With this thought in mind, an idea popped up in my mind. Once I was done with the matter at hand, I would go out and ask Reverend Nyaojiwe if he had any solution. The golden door in front of me hadn't closed yet. Just as I was about to step through it, the twin Rakshasa's sorrowful roars echoed behind me. I thought that it couldn't bear the blow and wanted to vent its anger. However, when I turned around, I saw that it was lying on the ground. The black smoke around it was dispersing, as if it was about to vanish. My heart tightened, and I gave up on the idea of going to the 3rd floor. I hurried over and asked, "What happened?" The twin Rakshasa seemed to be in great pain. After a long time, they finally replied to me, indicating that they weren't sure either. They only felt as if their bodies were about to split open. Since they didn't give me a clear answer, I didn't know what to do. I asked, "How can I help you?" However, this time, they didn't answer me. They rolled on the ground as if they were about to split open in the next second. While my heart was burning with anxiety, I suddenly felt my hands heat up. I lowered my head and saw that the mala beads in my hands were now as big as walnuts. They were glowing with golden light. The mala beads spun in my hands a few times, then flew toward the twin Rakshasa. I was a little shocked, and I didn't know what was going on. The mala beads hovered above the twin Rakshasa's heads and stopped. At this moment, the mala beads shone brightly, covering the twin Rakshasa's bodies. Instantly, the twin Rakshasa stopped screaming. It seemed they had fallen into a coma. Under the control of the mala beads, their bodies were no longer twisted. They turned around and sat down cross-legged, putting their palms together as if they were receiving the baptism of the Buddha's light. After seeing this scene, I was completely bewildered. I still didn't know what was going on. At the same time, the mala beads sprinkled a beam of Buddha's light in my direction. Before I could react, the Buddha's light entered my body. My body shook, and many Sanskrit words appeared in front of me. I had never studied Sanskrit before, but I could understand each and every golden word. It reminded me of a time when I received the reclining Buddha beads in Chiyo's tomb. Although I didn't know much about Buddhist scriptures, I could vaguely recognize the golden words in front of me. It was the most common scripture used by Buddhists to release souls from purgatory, the Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva's original vow scripture. The Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva's original vow scripture was one of the 3 scriptures of Ksitigarbha. This scripture described Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva's original vows, virtues, and vows. It emphasized Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva's incredible vows. The scripture recorded that Shakyamuni Buddha was in the heavenly palace of Kaili, the second layer of the 6 heavens of the world of desire. He was speaking on behalf of his mother, Mahayana. He praised Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva's great vows. Hell isn't empty. I swear not to become a Buddha, to save all sentient beings, to become Bodhi. He also introduced the typical examples of Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva's cultivation. Through the questions of Manjushri Bodhisattva, Mahayana Bodhisattva, the 4 heavenly kings, Samantabhadra Bodhisattva, Puwang Bodhisattva, the Great Debate, the Emperor of Yama, the Evil Ghost King, the Master Ghost King, the Unbreakable Earth God, Guanyin Bodhisattva, and the Void Bodhisattva, Bodhisattva's dialogue with Shakyamuni Buddha, the situation in hell was explained. In this scripture, Shakyamuni Buddha said that he had entrusted Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva with the task of educating and enlightening people in the Buddha-free world after his death. It seemed that Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva wanted me to recite the Ksitigarbha original wish scripture that had suddenly appeared in my head. I suddenly remembered that the twin Rakshasa had asked me to enlighten them. Could it be that reciting the Ksitigarbha original wish scripture was the process of enlightening them? In just a few minutes, all these unimaginable things had happened. That seemed to be the reason. After thinking about this, I calmed my body and mind. I sat down cross-legged and cleared my mind of distracting thoughts. Then, I recited the Ksitigarbha original wish scripture according to the golden words in front of me. This is what I have heard. At one time, the Buddha was in the Kaili heaven, preaching for his mother. At that time, all the Buddhas in the infinite world, including the great Bodhisattva Mahasattva, gathered together. According to legend, the Ksitigarbha original wish scripture could help the souls of the dead eliminate their negative karma, pay off their old debts, and repent for their evil deeds. It could also give the descendants of the dead the protection of Buddhism. Most importantly, it could prevent the reader from falling into the evil path and from dying. During this process, I could feel my entire body relaxing. I didn't know if it was just my imagination or if the Buddhist scripture was really effective. It took me more than half an hour to finish reading the golden words in front of me. I guess that this was just a small part of the Ksitigarbha original wish scripture. If I wanted to read the entire scripture, I would need a lot of time. At this moment, the last syllable had come out of my mouth. The golden words in front of me scattered and flew toward the twin Rakshasa, sitting cross-legged in the Buddha's light. Those golden words didn't enter their bodies. Instead, they hovered around them and wrapped them up. They didn't leave any gaps. After finishing this, I wasn't in a hurry to leave. First, I was interested in the twin Rakshasa's appearance after being enlightened. Second, I needed to get the Buddhist prayer beads before I could go upstairs. From some ancient books, I had learned that the baptism of the Buddha's light was the desire of many Buddhists. Although I wasn't a Buddhist, perhaps I could benefit a lot from the Buddha's light. More than half an hour had passed. I was a little tired, but the Buddha's light didn't change at all. While I was getting impatient, the golden words wrapped around the twin Rakshasa started to enter their bodies at a speed visible to the naked eye. After each character disappeared, the golden light on the twin Rakshasa's body became brighter. Gradually, I didn't dare to look at them with my naked eye. I didn't know how long it had been, but something suddenly appeared in my hand. I rubbed my eyes and took a closer look. It was the reclining Buddha beads. At this moment, the beads had returned to their original appearance. However, the golden light around them had vanished. Seeing this, I immediately turned to look at the twin Rakshasa's position. What I saw stunned me. 2 people with Buddha's light were sitting on the twin Rakshasa's seat. The man was wearing a yellow monk's robe. His red hair was now bald, and his scary face had become more handsome. The woman next to him was the female Rakshasa of the twin Rakshasa. She didn't have her enchanting appearance anymore. Now, she looked so solemn that people didn't dare to have wild thoughts about her. I had already prepared myself, but when I saw their changes, I couldn't help but sigh. I didn't expect that the twin Rakshasa would look like this after being enlightened by the Buddha. At this moment, the two of them looked at me. Their eyes were empty, and their faces were expressionless. When they saw that I hadn't reacted yet, they stood up and walked toward me. When they were 1 meter away from me, they put their palms together and chanted Buddha's name. Then they bowed to me and said, "Thank you, Grandmaster, for your kindness. We can't repay you. From now on, we can only pray for you in the netherworld." His words pulled me back from my daze. I remembered that they had said that they would ascend to the great path after being enlightened. Why did they say that they wanted to return to the netherworld? I frowned and asked the question in my mind. After listening to me, the two of them bowed to me. When we were being enlightened, we received a message from Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. He asked us to return to the netherworld as soon as possible and stay by his side to comprehend Buddhism. He wanted us to help the Bodhisattva save the sufferings of the netherworld. Then the two of them bowed to me again. Their bodies turned into black smoke and disappeared. It was obvious that they had returned to the netherworld. Chapter 763. After passing through the golden door, I arrived at the 3rd floor. Since I didn't know the situation, I didn't dare to rush in. I sat down and circulated the Tao energy in my body a few times before I calmed down. I slowly opened my eyes and heaved a sigh of relief. Then I started to observe the surroundings. With my previous experience, I took out the prayer beads and placed them on my hand. Then I stuck close to the wall and walked forward. I didn't dare to be careless. From time to time, I would glance at my surroundings. After walking for more than 10 minutes, the prayer beads didn't change. Since my nerves were always tense, I had consumed a lot of energy. At this time, I became even more nervous. It wasn't because I couldn't find a way to go upstairs, but because I felt a pair of eyes staring at me from behind. However, when I turned around, I didn't see anything. Of course, I didn't think that it was an illusion. After reaching the Seal Heavenly Master Realm, my perception of the surroundings had already surpassed that of ordinary people. Unless someone stronger than me deliberately created an illusion, I wouldn't be wrong. Before entering the Spirit Lock Tower, I couldn't imagine that I, a Heavenly Master, would be defeated again and again. I didn't even have the power to fight back against the twin Rakshasa on the 2nd floor. One could well imagine just how terrifying the monster in the 3rd level was for it to be able to make me so nervous. However, what would come would come. It was useless for me to be afraid. It would be better for me to recover my energy. Otherwise, if I were to be caught unprepared, I would be defeated in one blow. Thinking about this, I threw the prayer beads back into the Xiang Lu pouch. Then I sat down and closed my eyes to adjust my breathing. At the same time, I spread part of the Tao energy in my body around 5 meters around me. Although it consumed a lot of energy, the surroundings were filled with a strange aura. I couldn't afford to be careless. When the Tao energy in my body had circulated for the 9th cycle, the sound of Tao energy exploding echoed around me. The chaos, which had been silent for a long time, suddenly exploded. It made my body shake. I hurriedly opened my eyes and looked in the direction of the sound. I saw a broken arm flying toward me. I didn't expect it to be something like that. Although it was only a broken arm, with my previous experience, I didn't dare to underestimate it. Judging from how it easily broke through my Tao Chi barrier just now, its strength is already extraordinary. One must know that even a Heavenly Master Seal would not be able to break through my Tao Chi barrier with a single strike. Seeing that the arm was getting closer and closer to me, I hurriedly stood up and took out the Xian Yuan sword from my mouth. Unexpectedly, when the arm saw me raise the Xian Yuan sword high, it stopped in place and didn't come forward. However, its actions aroused my vigilance. I knew that none of the monsters in the Spirit Lock Tower were easy to deal with. It's definitely not, because it's afraid of the sword in my hand. As for the reason, I have no way of knowing it now. However, the fact that it didn't move gave me a chance. This was the best time to seize the initiative. While it was unprepared, I would deal a fatal blow to it. Perhaps I would be able to defeat it. After thinking about it, I placed the Xianyuan sword on my back and slowly leaned forward. The chi in my body was slowly transferred to the Xianyuan sword. When the arm saw me coming, it still didn't react. Seeing this, I felt that I had a better chance of winning. When I was only 2 meters away from him, I roared and swung the Xianyuan sword at the severed arm on the ground. Wherever the sword chi went, it stirred up a cloud of dust, completely blocking one's line of sight. When the sword chi landed on the ground, there was a deafening rumble that shook the entire building. The echo lingered in the building for a long time. When the dust settled and the echo died down, there was no trace of the arm in its original position. There was only a shallow hole on the ground left by the sword energy. Seeing this, I subconsciously thought that the arm had been cut to ashes by the Xianyuan sword. After all, that attack had used up all the Tao energy in my body. At this time, the exhaustion brought about by the exhaustion of Tao energy swept through my body. I couldn't stand and could only sit on the ground. I took a deep breath and calmed my aura. Then, I closed my eyes and began to absorb dragon energy from the jade bracelet to fill the gap. I didn't set up a barrier of Tao energy. I just wanted to recover faster. However, in just 2 cycles, a strange voice rang out beside his ear. Emperor Xianyuan? Hearing this sound, my heart tightened. Is there something else on this floor? Thinking about this, I opened my eyes and looked at the source of the sound. There was a skull on the ground 2 meters away from me. He hadn't sensed that this thing was here before. Could it be that the sound just now was coming from it? I looked around to make sure that there was nothing else. Then I fixed my eyes on the skull. I didn't dare to reach out to touch it, so I had to use the Xianyuan sword to poke the skull. As soon as the sword touched it, I saw its mouth open and close, saying, "How dare you?" After hearing this, I frowned and took the Xianyuan sword back. Then I asked, "Who are you?" The skull didn't answer. Instead, it talked to itself. "You're not Xianyuan Emperor. You're too weak. Why is the Xianyuan sword in your hand? Why do you have his aura?" His words were true. Compared to great Emperor Xianyuan, my strength was indeed far too lacking. However, since this thing recognized the Xianyuan sword, it wasn't an ordinary person. Then, I repeated my question. This time, it answered me neatly. "I'm the king of the Shang dynasty, Wang Hai." Then, there's a burst of sound in the air. It should be the sound of something breaking through the air. It was said that once one's speed exceeded the speed of sound, it would cause an air explosion and produce a thunderous sound. In the blink of an eye, 2 broken arms, 2 leg bones, and a chest cavity flew in from all directions. Together with the skull, they formed a complete skeleton. Seeing this, I suddenly thought of Prince Ye's corpse in the classic of Mountains and Seas. Prince Ye's corpse had 2 hands, 2 thighs, chest, head, and teeth broken in different places. It was said that Prince Ye was Shang Wang Hai. Wang Hai was killed, and his corpse was divided into 8 parts. Together, Wang Hai had 2 heads and 6 bodies. Wang Hai was the 6th grandson of King Bo Qi, the eldest son of Ming. He succeeded as the leader of the Shang clan and was one of the ancestors of the Shang clan. Wang Hai was from Shangqiu during the Xia dynasty. In the 11th year of Xia Shaokong, Wang Hai's father, Ming, was sent to deal with the problem of the Yellow River. At that time, Wang Hai started to help his father. However, in the 13th year of Xia dynasty, his father died in the Yellow River. So, the Shang people would worship Ming during the winter solstice. Because of this, Wang Hai officially became the 7th leader of the Shang clan. According to the records, in the 12th year of Emperor Xia, Wang Hai and his younger brother, Wang Heng, set off from Shangqiu. They carried goods and drove cattle and sheep to Yue in Hebei. Mianxin, the leader of the Yue tribe, had evil intentions. He killed Wang Hai, drove away Wang Hai's entourage, and took the goods and sheep. Since then, Wang Hai was dismembered and turned into the corpse of the ancient great monster king, Zai. According to the records, Wang Hai was the 6th grandson of Shang-Chi. Talking about the Shang-Chi, I suddenly thought of the silver-eyed man in the Fire God Temple. I remember that he had told me that he was Shang-Chi. He called me Imperial Father, and at that time, I knew my identity as Emperor Ku. So, the skeleton in front of me was Emperor Ku's seventh grandson. Suddenly thinking of this, I found it hard to express my emotions. I didn't know if I should be happy or worried. Seeing that I didn't respond, Wang Hai asked loudly, "Who are you? What are you doing here? Also, why do you have the aura of my ancestor, Emperor Xianyuan?" I smacked my lips. I didn't know how to answer him. I was Emperor Ku, so of course I had the aura of my ancestor, Emperor Xianyuan. Otherwise, how could I make the Xianyuan sword recognize me as its master? However, if I told him the truth, he definitely wouldn't believe me. But if I didn't tell him, he would probably attack me. He would bear the crime of deceiving his master and ancestor. After the incident with the twin Rakshasa on the second floor, I realized that everything that appeared in the Spirit Lock Tower had a reason. The appearance of Emperor Ku's seventh grandson on the third floor probably meant that he wanted this matter to have a connection. Moreover, there was nothing more important in this world than a bloodline connection. After thinking about it, I decided to tell him the details. After hearing my words, he was stunned on the spot. His body didn't move at all. However, in just a moment, the skeleton around him started to creak. Then he shouted, "How dare you? You dare to offend my ancestor? Watch as I pull out your tendons and pull out your bones, then throw you into the 9 hells to suffer the pain of purgatory." After saying that, his aura surged. I saw him spit out dark green smoke from his mouth, heading straight for me. I had never seen this smoke before, but it definitely wouldn't feel good after coming in contact with it. I immediately retreated and used the Tao energy in the veins of the heavens to build a barrier 3 meters around me to block the green smoke. Unexpectedly, when the smoke hit the barrier, it wasn't blocked at all. Instead, it passed through. This scene left me speechless. Seeing that the barrier was useless, I didn't dare to waste any more energy. I waved my hand and retracted the barrier. At the same time, I raised the Xianyuan sword to block the smoke. However, the Xianyuan sword didn't have any effect on the smoke. Instead, it sped up its speed. Seeing that, I quickly ran away. As I ran, I thought about how to prove what I had said so that he would stop. I had seen Wang Hai's speed just now. Before I could run far, he had already caught up with me, and his hand was already clutching my neck. From his empty eyes, I could feel the aura of death. Moreover, he gradually increased the strength of his hand, which proved that it wasn't an illusion. At this moment, my face was red. I didn't have any strength left in my body. I could only exhale through my nose and mouth. Chapter 764. When Wang Hai heard that, his hand paused for a moment. He moved his head closer, but didn't move again. Seeing that, I had time to explain. I immediately shouted, "I have a way to prove that what I said was true." I could clearly feel his hand tremble. But in the blink of an eye, he tightened his grip. His empty eyes seemed to be burning with fire, and the aura of death became thicker. At this moment, I didn't have any Tao energy in my body, but I still had plenty of shaman energy. However, I knew that if I used my shaman energy now, it would be great if I could break free. Otherwise, Wang Hai would kill me on the spot. He wouldn't give me a chance to explain. I didn't have time to think. At this critical moment, it was more important to stay alive. Then I bit the tip of my tongue to wake myself up. Then I mobilized the shaman energy in my heavenly veins and placed it on my hands. I clenched my weak fists. While Wang Hai wasn't paying attention, I aimed both of my fists at his face. Wang Hai didn't expect that I would still have the strength to struggle. He was stunned for a moment, but he quickly dodged my attack. Of course, I didn't think that I could defeat him with just one punch. I just wanted to divert his attention. At this moment, Wang Hai's hand that was strangling my neck loosened a little. I seized the chance to get rid of him and jumped 5 meters away. I thought that Wang Hai would chase after me when he saw that I had escaped. Unexpectedly, he stood still and didn't move. He didn't have any flesh or blood on his body. I couldn't tell why he was standing in the distance. While I was muttering to myself, Wang Hai retracted his aura and asked coldly, "You have the power of the monster race. Who are you?" He recognized the shaman energy in my body, but I didn't expect that he wouldn't attack me even though he knew that I had shaman energy in my body. Anyway, He must have his concerns. Of course, I wouldn't tell him my other identity. I just repeated what I had said earlier. Wang Hai didn't believe me. I couldn't blame him. If it hadn't happened to me, I wouldn't have believed that Tao energy and shaman energy could coexist. However, that was the only explanation I could come up with. As for the shaman chi in my body, I could only attribute it to the uniqueness of my bloodline. After Wang Hai listened to my explanation, he became silent and didn't pursue the matter. After a short while, he muttered to himself, "That year, the ancestor Emperor Ku perished together with a monster god Jun. It was said that their corpses merged together. Could it be that the powers of the human race and the monster race can coexist?" Hearing his words, I heaved a sigh of relief in my heart. Since he had already realized this, he probably wouldn't recklessly make a move against me. Thus, I paused and told him what I knew. After the war that year, Emperor Ku and monster god Ling fell at the same time. Apart from their corpses, their souls were intertwined and never separated for thousands of years. I am the reincarnation of Emperor Ku and monster god Ling. So, I am both Emperor Ku and monster god Ling. In actual fact, from a note that Nangong had written when he handed me the Xianyuan sword, I had a vague understanding of my origins. Combined with the half-human, half-beast statue that I had seen in the Yinshan King's tomb, as well as the words of worshipping evil spirits, I had a complete understanding of everything. I was indeed the reincarnation of Emperor Ku and monster god Ling. Back then, monster god Ling and Emperor Ku perished together. After their corpses merged together, the human race used the blood sacrifice technique to transform all the Tai Sui that they could find into the veins of the true dragon. It wasn't until King Wen performed the Book of Changes and used the power of the Book of Changes to send the entangled souls of monster god Ling and Emperor Ku into the cycle of reincarnation that the matter finally came to an end. And for my parents to name me Zhou Yi, it was really already predestined. After understanding everything, I tried to ask the silver-eyed man in the fire god temple who addressed me as father. However, I couldn't spare any time. Now that I met Wang Hai, who is also a descendant of Emperor Ku, I hesitated for a while before telling him everything. I wanted to see if he knew anything. After Wang Hai heard what I said, his body shook. His empty eyes were filled with shock. I didn't need to ask to know that he didn't know anything at all. After saying all this, I felt perturbed. I didn't know what his attitude would be in such a situation. However, looking at his current state, at least he didn't immediately attack me like he did earlier. That was a good sign. In terms of power, I wasn't Wang Hai's match at all. Now that I didn't have any external power to rely on, my only way out was to make Wang Hai accept my identity. After staying silent for a long time, Wang Hai looked conflicted. He asked me again, "How do I know that you aren't lying to me on purpose?" His gaze was conflicted. It was most likely that he believed my words, but he still asked. It was most likely that he couldn't accept it. I smiled bitterly. You also know that Taoism and witchcraft can't coexist. Apart from this situation, who else can cultivate both Taoism and witchcraft chi at the same time? Wang Hai shook his head in disbelief. There are countless strange and unpredictable people in the world. Cultivating both Taoism and witchcraft chi at the same time doesn't mean anything. It was somewhat unreasonable of him to say that, but at this moment, I was the fish on the chopping block. After thinking for a while, I said, "If you don't believe me, I have another way to prove my identity." I suddenly remembered that when I was at home, I had set up a formation in his ancestral grave in order to punish old scoundrel Zhou. It was called the Ancestral Seeking Formation, and it could identify bloodlines. I told Wang Hai about the effect of the formation. After listening to it, he was silent for a while and nodded. Then, "We'll use this method to verify our relationship." After saying that, he took a step back and didn't say anything else. Before setting up the formation, I told Wang Hai that I needed time to recover the Taoism in my body. Firstly, I didn't dare to determine if the formation would be effective in the Spirit Lock Tower. If the formation failed, Wang Hai might attack me. At that time, I would have the ability to resist him. Secondly, I also needed to use Taoism to draw talismans. Although the witchcraft chi in my body could also draw talismans, the cost of using witchcraft chi to draw talismans was too high. After about an hour, the Taoism in my body was finally full. Only then did I take out the weasel hair brush and talisman paper and seriously draw talismans on the ground. With my current realm, drawing this kind of low-level talisman was a piece of cake. However, what I had to do next made me hesitate. Back when I set up the formation in the ancestral grave, I used two types of yin and yang wood, the peach wood and locust wood. Only through these two types of wood could I draw the ancestral chi. But now, in this spirit lock tower, there wasn't even a stone, let alone a wooden branch. After thinking for a while, I had an idea. The ancestral seeking formation was a formation recorded in the first chapter of the Death Scripture. Back then, with my glory of knowledge cultivation, I could only copy it. But after reaching the heavenly master realm, I could see the essence through the phenomenon. The reason why I used the peach wood and locust wood was to borrow the yin and yang chi to communicate with the formation. Without these two things, I could directly manipulate the yin and yang chi to achieve the same effect. With this thought, I mobilized the Taoism in my body and separated the yin and yang chi to send into the ancestral seeking formation. The essence of Taoism was yang chi. Logically speaking, I should summon Tong Tong and control the yang chi myself. It would be most appropriate for Tong Tong to bring out pure yin chi to cooperate with me. However, Wang Hai hadn't made his stance clear yet. Naturally, I couldn't let Tong Tong come out and take the risk with me. After sending in the yin and yang chi, the ancestral seeking formation was finally formed. However, there was still one last step to distinguish the bloodline. That was to send Wang Hai's and my blood into the formation. I circulated my Taoism and forced a drop of blood from my fingertip to send into the formation. Then, I turned and told Wang Hai what I needed. Wang Hai was a skeleton, and there wasn't a drop of blood in his body. However, blood came from the marrow, so it was the same to use his skeleton. After hearing my words, Wang Hai didn't hesitate and directly threw an arm bone into the formation. Then he asked me, "How about this?" I nodded and didn't say anything. Together with Wang Hai, I stared at the ancestral seeking formation. At this time, a large amount of yellow smoke was rising from the formation. The drop of blood that I had dripped earlier had already adhered to Wang Hai's arm bone. The yellow smoke was coming from the place where the blood was adhering to the bone. Besides the smoke, the drop of blood was eroding the arm bone at a speed visible to the naked eye. Not long after, its volume had shrunk by half. However, the arm bone didn't have any trace left. It was still bright and clean, just a little more lustrous than the other parts. At the same time, I suddenly felt a warm feeling in my heart. When I turned to look at Wang Hai, I felt an inexplicable sense of intimacy. It was as if I had known him for a long time. I didn't know if Wang Hai felt this way or not, but he had seen the blood dissolving into the bone with his own eyes. I didn't need to explain it to him. He should be able to understand the result. Just as I heaved a sigh of relief, Wang Hai suddenly punched the ground. He suppressed his voice and roared. How could this be? Obviously, he couldn't accept this situation. This punch was filled with hatred, and all the strength in his body burst out. In a flash, it was as if there was an earthquake. Dust flew everywhere, and the ground trembled. The ancestor, seeking array in front of me, collapsed in an instant. Even I couldn't control my body and flew backward. Even if I used all the Tao Chi in my body to protect myself, it was of no use. I knew that Wang Hai was strong, but I didn't expect him to be so terrifying. Now, it seemed that he didn't directly kill me. Otherwise, I was afraid that I wouldn't even have the chance to explain. Fortunately, when I was arranging the ancestor-seeking array, Wang Hai had retreated some distance. After I flew backward for a few meters, I barely withstood the impact of the fist wind and wasn't seriously injured. However, I didn't know why, but at this time Wang Hai let out a muffled groan, and there was a cracking sound coming from his chest. I turned to look and saw that two of his sternum were inexplicably broken. With Wang Hai's cultivation, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that his bones were as hard as iron. There was no movement at all. How could his sternum be broken for no reason? I didn't understand. Wang Hai's expression also changed dramatically. He looked around and didn't know what had happened. At this time, an idea flashed in my mind. I turned to look at the broken ancestor seeking array on the ground. I recalled old Rogue Joe's embarrassment when I arranged the array. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.